Chapter 384. Everyone looked at this scene speechlessly. The entire 40,000 troops knelt down at the same time, like a surging tide, and instantly quieted down in front of Li Tianlan. 40,000 troops. Li Tianlan. One kneeled and the other bowed. In the lingering sound of shouting "Your Highness," there was a suffocating power. No one dared to make irresponsible remarks about this seemingly normal but actually extremely abnormal scene. Gu Xingyun didn't dare either. Even if the most elite 40,000 troops looked more like the private army of the Dongqing clan at this time. Thinking of the Border Control Corps, everyone thought of a taboo, or at least a taboo name. Dongqing Corps. Both the Dongqing clan and the official denied this name. But wasn't the Dongqing Corps in this scene? Even more than the Dongqing Corps. The light of the big screen turned. The scene in the maneuver area disappeared. The scene of a dense army kneeling in front of Li Tianlan appeared on the big screen. In the field. Outside the field. Inside and outside Xianxia state. Countless people saw this scene. Compared with the little scar left on Wang Tianzong's palm by Li Tianlan's sword intent, the scene in front of them was really shocking. Because the meaning of this scene was too rich. The military super-wealthy family with a giant in Xianxia state, the most elite 40,000 troops among hundreds of thousands of troops, shouldering the responsibility of the Li family, the 22-year-old invincible realm combat capability. Sai City, the academics. Gu Xingyun, who was seriously injured, had left. Wang Tianzong, who still had killing intent. Everything was mixed together invisibly. Li Tianlan fully proved his potential today. The performance of Dongqing Wudi and the 40,000 troops also completely showed that the Dongqing clan had regarded Li Tianlan as its future core. The academics expressed a certain degree of support for Li Tianlan. Wang Tianzong's killing intent did not dissipate, but he suddenly left. Gu Xingyun did not make a move because of his injury, but it was obvious that he would not let Li Tianlan grow up. All the contradictions and conflicts appeared in front of people. And it was foreseeable that as Li Tianlan and the East Emperor Palace became stronger, such conflicts would continue to escalate. This was a vortex that could swallow Xianxia state. And Li Tianlan was standing in the center of the vortex at this time. There were still not many people who were optimistic about Li Tianlan, but more than half of those who really thought that Li Tianlan couldn't make it had disappeared. As the young governor of Sai City, he had the combat capability of the invincible realm, and he had the full support of the Dongqing clan and the inclination of the academics. Compared with the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City, Li Tianlan might still be relatively weak. But he no longer had any shortcomings. No one dared to say that Li Tianlan had no background. The Dongqing clan, Sai City, and even the academics would become powerful forces for him to break the Li family's imprisonment in the future. Li Tianlan slowly stood up straight. "Get up." His tone was calm. The 40,000 soldiers stood up and saluted him again. When they knelt down, they shouted, "Your Highness." Li Tianlan understood what Dongqing Wudi meant, so he knew very well what he should do. Withdraw from the Sky Academy first. The exercise is over. The maneuver was not over yet. But for Li Tianlan, the next maneuver was meaningless. The East Emperor Palace was already the first. The various exercises that followed were meaningless to many people. Today was the first day of the maneuver. For too many people, the real maneuver had actually ended. It ended like this. The 40,000 troops kept a neat formation and began to walk out of the Sky Academy. The fighter jets and helicopters in the sky slowly landed. The tanks and armored vehicles returned to the arsenal. The tense atmosphere gradually dissipated with the departure of the army. The sun was still shining. It was light and breezy. But all of this seemed to be the calm before the storm. Li Tianlan, the Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City. They were still there. The contradiction would not disappear. Li Tianlan walked to the high platform in front of the grandstand. There was applause in the packed grandstand. Everyone was applauding. Those who saw Li Tianlan, those who were not optimistic about him, the people of the Wang family of Beihai, and even Gu Xingyun were applauding. No matter how they felt inside. There should be applause here. The applause was dedicated to the young man who walked up the platform step by step at a steady pace. He was 22 years old. Very young. But he was His Highness. Dongqing Hongguang was also applauding. The applause in Luojing, Zhongyun, naturally could not reach the Sky Academy, and Li Tianlan could not hear it. But all of Dongqing Hongguang's applause fell into the ears of the old man opposite him. The old man was dressed in a purple tang suit. His white hair had just been dyed black. He was thin, and even his appearance was similar to Dongqing Hongguang's. However, compared with Dongqing Hongguang's usual gentleness and leisure, the old man was always tense, sitting there looking particularly majestic. He and Dongqing Hongguang had watched the maneuver of the two academies of Zhongzhou State together. At this time, when he heard the applause, his attitude was a little subtle. "How is it?" Dongqing Hongguang looked at the old man's subtle face and asked with a chuckle. "Not bad." The old man nodded. "Best," Dongqing Hongguang said without hesitation. The old man shook his head and seemed to be helpless. "You don't agree?" Dongqing Hongguang asked. "Does it make sense?" The old man shook his head, and his expression was a little complicated. "This was your choice back then. I didn't agree." "But you didn't object." Dongqing Hongguang's expression became serious. He was the old patriarch of the Dongqing clan. But except for some new families, no one could have absolute ruling power in a big family. Even the patriarch was quite constrained in many aspects. The Dongqing clan was brave and loyal. They had their status today because generations of people exchanged their lives for it, and they were still willing to contribute to Zhongzhou State. There were several brothers and sisters in Dongqing Hongguang's generation, but most of them died on the battlefield. Only Dongqing Hongguang himself and the old man in purple in front of him survived until now. Dongqing Hongjian, Dongqing Hongguang's biological elder brother. Li Tianlan had told everyone how terrible his future would be with his performance. As Dongqing Hongguang's ideal core figure of the next generation, he definitely wanted to use all his strength and resources on Li Tianlan with the power of this maneuver, which required Dongqing Hongjian's approval. This attitude was extremely important. He did a good job. Dongqing Hongjian was silent for a while and nodded gently. This was recognition. But recognition was only for his performance. Dongqing Hongguang seemed to know what his elder brother was thinking. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, there's still a lot of time." Dongqing Hongjian pondered for a while, then nodded and said, "Let's wait and see." He stood up and slowly left the hall. President Li Huaqing was also applauding. Hua Qingfeng, the sect leader of Zhongzhou State's shadow sect, who personally protected him during this visit, had arranged the itinerary. Like Li Huaqing, he witnessed the maneuver. Looking at the president applauding, Hua Qingfeng also had a smile on his face. "President," Hua Qingfeng whispered, "I helped you decline the dinner of the president of Star State. Our private plane takes off at 8 o'clock. "Okay, I got it." Li Huaqing turned around. With a smile on his face, his eyes were bright, and his mind seemed to be immersed in the maneuver just now. The president didn't know martial arts. But he could see the result. He was very satisfied with Li Tianlan. Very satisfied. Not bad. Li Huaqing suddenly laughed and didn't hide his mood at all. This was his 7th year as the president of Zhongzhou State. In another 3 years, Zhongzhou State would usher in a turbulent general election. Some undercurrents began to surge as early as last year and became more and more intense. Li Huaqing deserved to be in Zhongzhou State. In recent decades, among all the presidents, Li Huaqing was a very successful president. But he still hadn't completed the layout of the academics, which was undoubtedly a sore point for him. Li Tianlan's appearance seemed to be a good medicine. Especially from today on, his influence would not be limited to the special warfare system. This was what Li Huaqing wanted to see most. "You've worked hard, Qingfeng." Li Huaqing glanced at Hua Qingfeng and said with a smile. Hua Qingfeng shook his head with a smile, turned around, and walked out of the room. Walking in the corridor of the White House, he thought for a moment and took out his phone again. The phone went directly back to Zhongzhou State and called a high-ranking official in the headquarters of Shadow Sect. "Did you watch the final maneuver?" Hua Qingfeng asked in a straightforward tone. A somewhat emotional voice sounded on the phone. A 22-year-old young highness. Tut tut, among the younger generation, that person is probably really invincible. Find a chance to get in touch with him. Hua Qingfeng said. Cooperation? The person on the other end of the phone was a little surprised. Otherwise? Hua Qingfeng laughed. Do we have to be enemies with him because he is too powerful? There is no conflict of interest. Sword Emperor? On the phone, the person was a little hesitant. He actually wanted to cooperate with Li Tianlan. But Wang Tianzong's killing intent toward Li Tianlan was obvious. No one thought that he would give up his killing intent after answering a phone call. This time, Li Tianlan could end up with a minor injury, just because something was delayed. If he cooperated with Li Tianlan now, his future would be very difficult, and he would offend Wang Tianzong, Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State. In the hearts of all the experts in Zhongzhou State, this was a mountain, an insurmountable peak. Those who dared to cooperate with Li Tianlan before a clear situation appeared were basically giants in Zhongzhou State who were not afraid of the revenge of Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai. Shadow Sect, which had almost no background, obviously did not have this confidence at present. It's okay. Hua Qingfeng's face was gloomy for a moment, but he still insisted on his opinion. He was very clear that those who dared to cooperate with Li Tianlan at this time were giants who were not afraid of revenge. But similarly, such giants, except for the Dongxing clan, would basically not fully support Li Tianlan. Most of what they did was just investment for the expected benefits. Today, Li Tianlan already had an absolutely strong background and strength. There was a whirlpool around him. But in Hua Qingfeng's view, it was also a great opportunity. According to the most basic maneuver process, Zhuang Huayang, the principal of the Sky Academy, accompanied Li Tianlan to the high platform in front of the stand. After making a very routine speech and praise, he announced that East Emperor Palace was the first place in the final team maneuver of the two academies. In fact, this was also equivalent to announcing that East Emperor Palace had become the first place in the total credits of the two academies. There was no suspense at all. But the maneuver was not over yet. Next, there were different maneuvers such as electronic intrusion, mechanical control, and one-on-one actual combat. If this year's team maneuver was a competition between the top young geniuses, then the next maneuver was the time for ordinary students to compete for credits and plot against each other. There were nearly 4,000 students in the two academies. The official end of the maneuver was August 10th. There were still 10 days. 10 days later, the two academies would announce the first place in the total credits of this year and the first place in various maneuvers. At the same time, the credits would be calculated, graduation ceremonies and commendation meetings would be held, and graduation medals and various awards would be awarded according to grades. At that time, the two academies would also hold something similar to a press conference. But there would be no reporters at the scene. In addition to the heavyweights of Kunlun City, the Ministry of National Defense, the Ministry of Security, and the General Staff, various departments of the military and the special warfare system would probably attend and choose the students they needed. So even if everyone knew that this year's maneuver of the two academies was actually over. But according to the process, today was actually just the beginning. But all of this, it had nothing to do with East Emperor Palace. On the last day after the maneuver, Li Tianlan only needed to send a representative to determine the future development direction of East Emperor Palace with the people of the Ministry of National Defense and Security and what support Zhongzhou State would give to East Emperor Palace. His heart had flown to the battlefield in Snow Country, which was destined to be chaotic, and to the Samsara Palace that had collapsed. Tianlan, do you have anything to say? Zhuang Huayang finally finished what even he thought was nonsense and handed the microphone to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took the microphone and looked at the full stands in front of him. His eyes were in a trance. He saw a lot of familiar people. Gu Xingyun, whose face was gloomy but forced a smile. Yi Fengqing, whose face was complicated. Li Beidan, who laughed and beamed with joy, sat in his wheelchair and talked as if there was no one else around. The members of East Emperor Palace surrounded him. Han Donglu, the founder of the Flourishing Age Fund, smiled and waved at him. Han Xinyan, who looked a little surprised. Dongqing Rushi, whose small face was full of colors, was clear and proud. Different people had different moods. But compared with the whole audience, the people he was familiar with were few. More people were destined to have more moods. Li Tianlan looked at them silently. There was another round of applause in the stands, and it became more and more enthusiastic. Everyone was applauding. Li Tianlan froze for a while and finally understood. Finally, there was this day. He and the Li family could gradually not care about other people's thoughts. He stood here. There must be flowers and applause in front of him. Li Tianlan laughed. The Li family deserves to be in Zhongzhou State. I also deserve to be in the Li family. His voice was clear and indifferent. He still said some content implicitly. But everyone understood what he meant. The Li family deserves to be in Zhongzhou State. Of course, he was talking about the treason case many years ago. Li Tianlan paused and continued. In the dark world in the next 100 years, there are 3 words that are destined to be called great. Zhongzhou State. East Emperor Palace. Li Tianlan. He looked around at the audience. The greatest words. At this moment, Li Tianlan's heart was extremely calm. However, it was also filled with unparalleled arrogance. In the sun, his whole body was shining, and he looked like he was making threatening gestures. This was the Li family's first declaration to the public after many years of silence. It was also Li Tianlan's first declaration to Zhongzhou State. Zhongzhou State, East Emperor Palace, Li Tianlan. They would all be great. The applause rang out again. No matter whether they were willing or not, everyone was applauding hard. At this moment, Li Tianlan might not know that because of this maneuver, he had created countless records in the history of the Li family of the 2 academies. For the first time in all previous final maneuvers, he killed the game in advance and ended all suspense. In all previous final maneuvers, he was the youngest and the strongest. In all previous final maneuvers, he killed the most people and injured the most people. In all previous final maneuvers, he had the highest total credits. There were many more firsts. On this day, Li Tianlan, who was only 22 years old, stood here and swept away the joint efforts of several young chosen ones in Zhongzhou State with an absolutely invincible posture. He destroyed the cooperation of the 6 teams by himself. To be exact, he was alone. He shattered the whole era. That was the era of the future. The rise of the chosen ones. Was it the fortune of Zhongzhou State? Or the disaster of Zhongzhou State? Chapter 385. When he opened his eyes, the scorching sun on the horizon had gradually become dim. The afterglow of the setting sun shone through the window, rendering everything in the room more dazzling than when the sun was at its peak. Dusk enveloped everything in the outside world. The light was beautiful and brilliant, but with indescribable dilapidation and desolation. Xianxia lay on the bed, looking at the hazy and dazzling light outside the window. He was silent and didn't want to move. He seemed to have been injected with anesthetic. But the pain was still spreading in his body. The pain came from the inside and penetrated his skin from his internal organs. It was like sword intent, but it was extremely illusory. When it fell on his body, there was only coldness and destruction. The sharp pain dispelled the confusion after waking up from the coma. Xianxia felt the pain in his body. He finally realized who he was. Today was the final maneuver of the 2 academies. This was his most glorious moment. In front of the world, he had never exposed his heavenly king heart. But he showed his martial arts to everyone. He came from a family that had only risen in recent decades, and his martial arts strength was extremely ordinary. But now he was qualified to be on par with Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingxiao. He would definitely enter the invincible realm in the future. He was also a young chosen one. He was brilliant today. That move of the starry sky amazed the entire Zhongzhou State. But similarly, he was a loser today. His light might not fade, but in front of the real chosen one, all his glory would be overshadowed. When people mentioned him in the future, they might still mention his shining brilliance today. But the brilliance was like the dusk outside the window, gorgeous but dilapidated. No matter how dazzling it was still dark at the end. That sword intent. The sword that made the world silent and empty. That was the eternal light. Jiang Shangyu's eyes gradually changed. All kinds of colors intertwined in his pupils, and eventually became complicated emotions. He quietly opened his eyes and lay on the bed, a little sluggish. The door was pushed open from the outside. Gu Xingyun, who was pale and struggling to support himself, slowly walked into the ward. Li Shi was beside him. Jiang Shangyu moved his body and struggled to sit up. Your health matters. Just lie down. Gu Xingyun smiled and waved his hand. Your injuries are not light, but they will not threaten your foundation. However, you must exercise less in the future. He paused for a moment before continuing, but there won't be much to do next. Jiang Shangyu responded and then said, Your Highness. Madam, how are Hanshan's injuries? It's the same weight as you. During this period of time, you can recuperate in the Sky Academy. When the drill is over, come back with me. Gu Xingyun looked at Jiang Shangyu with soft eyes, with an obvious appreciation. I've informed your father. He was going to come over, but something happened in the northern borderline that he had to deal with. At that time, I will personally send you back to the northern borderline. Thank you, Your Highness. Jiang Shangyu said respectfully. No need to thank me. Gu Xingyun shook his head and said with a smile, We're on the same side. You don't have to be so polite. You boy, hurry to recuperate for me. Qingqing has always told me that she wants to travel to the northern borderline. After a while, I'll ask her to find you. You have to be a good tour guide for Qingqing. Don't let my daughter be wronged, okay? Jiang Shangyu froze for a moment. His eyes gradually showed a completely uncontrollable ecstasy, and his eyes subconsciously looked at Li Shi beside Gu Xingyun. Li Shi was expressionless, like a lifeless sculpture, but her eyes softened a little. She nodded slightly. Jiang Shangyu took a deep breath, but he could not hide the smile on his face in any case. The smile on his face kept expanding. In this state, Jiang Shangyu looked a little silly. Your Highness, don't worry. Qingqing will never be wronged in the northern borderline. Jiang Shangyu looked solemn and almost promised. His pale face was a little flushed with excitement, and his expression was solemn as if he was swearing. Gu Xingyun smiled gently, nodded, and said meaningfully, You're good. I'm very relieved to have Qingqing by your side. Jiang Shangyu scratched his head, and his smile became purer. You pay attention to rest. Gu Xingyun said, Don't think too much. Jiang Shangyu nodded. He hesitated a little but still said, Your Highness, Li Tunlun, don't worry. Gu Xingyun's figure paused. You are still young. For you, he is indeed very strong now. But 10 or 20 years later, looking back at today, you may feel that he just won a maneuver today. The one who can laugh to the end is the winner. Gu Xingyun's figure walked out of the ward. Jiang Shangyu looked at his and Li Shi's back with gloomy eyes, but he was thinking about Gu Xingyun's purpose of coming. This time, it seemed to be a routine, but there was too much information in it. Jiang Shangyu had to sort out all the things. He liked Li Qingqing. He really liked her, and he liked her for many years. Although Li Qingqing was still very young at that time. When Jiang Shangyu saw her for the first time, he was very sure that Li Qingqing should not stay in Kunlun City, which looked brilliant but hid too much filth. He knew Phoenix Pavilion, so he could roughly guess Li Qingqing's fate in the future. In the process of development, the Jiang family had always been quietly and carefully touching some taboos. For Kunlun City, the Jiang family knew it more deeply than most people. 3 years ago in Heaven Capital, when Gong Sun Qi and even the Dongqing clan were reminding Li Tianlan to be careful of Phoenix Pavilion. Even earlier, the Jiang family had already learned through special intelligence channels that Li Shi was going to Heaven Capital. This also made Jiang Shangyu more sure of some of Gu Xingyun's plans. Li Shi went to Heaven Capital secretly, not for national affairs, but for private affairs. But Li Tianlan's origin and Li Shi's past made Jiang Shangyu uncertain how far Li Shi would go. If Li Tianlan did not die, Li Qingqing was most likely the fatal poison prepared for Li Tianlan by Kunlun City. This was not Li Qingqing's destiny, but it was the destiny of Phoenix Pavilion. So in Heaven Capital, when Jiang Shangyu and Li Tianlan met for the first time, He had almost undisguised killing intent to Li Tianlan. At that time, he did it for a woman. Or a girl. Gu Xingyun and Li Shi left the ward. The sound of the door closing was heard. Jiang Shangyu lay quietly on the bed, thinking about all aspects. The cooperation between Gu Xingyun, Li Shi, Li Qingqing, Gu Hanshan and Li Tianlan, the future of the 3000 world, the choice that the Jiang family had to face, the Wang family of Beihai. Thousands of thoughts formed a rough outline in his mind. The outline was clear. But there were too many possibilities inside the outline. Too many possibilities means too many choices. So it was extremely complicated. Jiang Shangyu thought about it silently for a long time. His cell phone rang. Jiang Shangyu took out his mobile phone and pressed the answer button. "It's me." On the other end of the phone, the voice of Jiang Shan, the leader of Beijiang, sounded. "Dad." Jiang Shangyu called with a smile, but his eyes were a little complicated. The father and son were silent on the other side of the phone. "I'm sorry." After a long time, Jiang Shangyu whispered, "Today, I lost." "It doesn't matter." Jiang Shangyu smiled and said, "You did a good job. A temporary failure is nothing." Jiang Shangyu wanted to speak, but when the words reached his mouth, he swallowed them back. After the strike of lowering the realm, his strength was pushed from the stabilization phase of the thundershocking realm to the level of just entering the thundershocking realm. His body became weaker, but his state of mind became more and more perfect. He said yes with a smile and didn't say much. "Don't push yourself too hard." Jiang Shan sighed softly. Jiang Shangyu was not only his son, but also the greatest pride of his life. This son had never made him worry about him since he was a child. His forbearance, his wisdom, and his low-key even amazed Jiang Shan many times. He had always seen what Jiang Shangyu had been doing over the years, and even knew his plan. Today's final maneuver was the official beginning for the Li family and Li Tianlan. It was the same for Jiang Shangyu. He lost. But the plan would not be changed, let alone stopped. "It's okay." Jiang Shangyu's smile was light and breezy. He sat on the bed with his mobile phone. When he was about to continue to say something, he coughed violently. The cough came suddenly, but it was extremely violent. His whole body twitched violently with the cough, and the wounds on his body were also cracking. Thick blood flowed down his nostrils and fell on the quilt in front of him. Jiang Shan listened quietly, as silent as a dead man. After a long time, Jiang Shangyu breathed a sigh of relief and sat on the bed, panting violently. "Nosebleed again?" Jiang Shan asked. "No." Jiang Shangyu raised his head. His voice was a little hoarse, but his smile was extremely bright. "I'm really okay. Dad, don't worry about me. If it doesn't work, go back to Beijiang." Jiang Shan's voice was weak, bitter, and trembling. "Xiaoyu, you don't have to work so hard. I'm here in Beijiang, and no one dares to hurt you." Jiang Shangyu opened his eyes wide and looked at the ceiling above. There was no one here, so he didn't have to try hard to control his facial features. Strange, dark red blood flowed out of his nose, mouth, eyes, and ears. He was still laughing. He was smiling with forbearance and determination. "There used to be a very strong super-rich family in Zhongzhou State," he said softly. "I can't tell how powerful they were. They couldn't compare with the Wang family of Beihai, but they were much stronger than the Jiang family. They had a deep foundation, a long history, and a huge foundation. Such a rich family just made a wrong choice." He paused and continued, "Maybe it wasn't a mistake. In the process, they made a lot of mistakes. Dad, do you know what their biggest mistake was?" Jiang Shan was a little stunned. Their biggest mistake was that they didn't leave a good enough descendant in the end. So all the glory turned into misery. The patriarch of the rich family died in a long-planned air crash. The patriarch's wife committed suicide, countless industries were seized and auctioned, and the vassal families were fragmented. That family originally had descendants, but the most outstanding descendants were basically in prison. Some were sentenced to death, and some were sentenced to life imprisonment. Oh, I forgot. They did have outstanding descendants, but the woman who was supposed to be the most capable of supporting the mess was crazy, completely crazy. She jumped from the highest place in Huading and regarded herself as a bird. In the end, she fell and was smashed to pieces. That once glorious rich family, the whole family, even a dog, didn't have a good end in the end. He held the phone, his eyes were in a trance, and he whispered, "From that time on, I knew that the pursuit of ultimate glory was the same as the pursuit of ultimate sin, a road of no return. So I understand what the Wang family of Beihai has done in recent years. I'm sure that if the Wang family of Beihai collapsed today, their end would be more tragic. As for our Jiang family, it may not be like this, but it's just because we are not as strong as them." "Dad, if I don't fight and hide in Beijiang, after you retire, unless I'm willing to attach to a large group and be a puppet, how can I have a good end? In the current position of the Jiang family, if we don't climb up, we will fall into hell forever and never recover." Jiang Shan was silent and didn't know what to say for a moment. Jiang Shangyu's facial features were no longer bleeding. His spirit became more and more sluggish, but his voice became softer. "Don't worry, Dad, I know what I'm doing. I've been preparing for many years. It's just the beginning to fight. I will lead the Jiang family to the position where we should exist. The struggle of the Jiang family for generations can't be in vain. Absolutely not." Jiang Shan smiled bitterly and didn't know what to say for a moment. "Make some preparations." Jiang Shangyu whispered, "Qingqing may go to Beijiang after a while. I just promised Gu Xingyun that I would be a tour guide." "Qingqing?" Jiang Shan hesitated. "Li Qingqing?" Jiang Shangyu said, Hey," Jiang Shan sneered. "Doesn't Gu Hanshan intend to make his daughter the new Phoenix Pavilion master? But it's normal for him to change his mind after seeing your performance today. He's going to use his daughter to force us to make a stand." "It doesn't matter," Jiang Shangyu said calmly. "In this situation, we have to show our attitude. If I can get Qingqing, I'm willing. She shouldn't stay in a place like Kunlun City." Jiang Shan said. Just as he was about to speak, there was a sudden knock on the door. The secretary walked into his office. On the phone, Jiang Shangyu vaguely heard a sentence. "Secretary, the decision-making committee has urgent documents." He smiled, hung up the phone silently, and sighed a little tiredly. "The Wang family of Beihai. The Li family." He thought silently and felt like he was standing in the middle of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family. So he could understand the Wang family of Beihai and Wang Tianzong's determination to kill Li Tianlan even if he had to break the rules. That was the indescribable pressure and fear accumulated over hundreds of years of glory. Climbing to the peak was a road of no return. When it came to what to carry, Wang Tianzong was the one who carried the most. He could also understand the Li family's forbearance. This was the attitude they had to show when they had nothing. Li Honghe and the Li family were forbearance. Li Tianlan had to show a stronger side at some time. What about himself? Jiang Shangyu thought silently. The Jiang family was never at the peak, but it was not nothing. Wasn't this the most awkward position in the middle? In such a position, he had to endure something and carry something at the same time. The setting sun outside the window completely disappeared at the end of the sky. The night gradually covered the sky. The moment the light disappeared completely, Jiang Shangyu turned his head and looked out of the window. In the dim light of the night, there was a face without fanatical ambition but extremely persistent and firm. I finally wrote this chapter. Chapter 386. On the westernmost edge of the Sky Academy, there were several small but extremely exquisite villas. They were close to the river and the sea, far away from the arsenal, the training ground, and the teaching building. They were surrounded by the sound of flowing water all day long and were extremely quiet. This was the reception of the highest standard in the Sky Academy. The final maneuver of each session took about 10 days to half a month. During this period, some important figures who came to watch the ceremony were usually arranged here. Gu Xingyun had been to the Sky Academy several times. But this was the first time he lived here. He used to like living in the purple gold pavilion on the winter mountain of Huading very much. But now the purple gold pavilion had been violently destroyed by Li Tianlan, and he was injured. Under such circumstances, he only wanted to ensure his own safety to deal with the maneuver. Apart from that, he did not even think of stepping out of the Sky Academy. Even though he had a bodyguard who was even stronger than him at his peak, he could not help it. The hospital of the Sky Academy was about 2 or 3 kilometers away from the reception. As the night fell, Gu Xingyun and Li Shi walked side by side on the dimly lit path, keeping silent. The two of them walked quietly, neither fast nor slow, as if they were taking a stroll. Take a walk? Gu Xingyun had forgotten when was the last time he took a walk with Li Shi, just as he could not remember how long it had been since Li Shi smiled. Stepping on the Li family, ascending to the top of Zhongzhou State, glorious and known as the god of war. But he shared the same bed with the person who slept next to him. They were as close as ice, yet worlds apart. Gu Xingyun disliked Li Shi more and more. It wasn't that he didn't love her, it was just pure dislike. It wasn't just because of the humiliation she had suffered when she was with Li Guangtu. Moreover, with her by his side, Gu Xingyun often did not know whether his life was a success or a failure. With a beauty by his side, his authority was monstrous. But he was not complacent. He couldn't be complacent. So over the years, he went back to Kunlun City less and less. Even if he went back, he basically didn't see Li Shi. If she hadn't been seriously injured this time and needed her protection, Li Shi would have left the moment the team maneuver ended. How about Jiang Shangyu? Gu Xingyun suddenly broke the silence. Li Shi's footsteps paused. An instinctive vigilance flashed in her eyes, and then she said numbly, "Very good. This is the person you think highly of?" Gu Xingyun laughed. "This is the most suitable person for Qingqing." Li Shi said, "Jiang Shangyu likes Qingqing. I'm sure of it. I like it very much. I like it very much, very affectionate." Li Shi had seen the way Jiang Shangyu looked at Li Qingqing several times. If he didn't have deep feelings in his heart, his eyes wouldn't have that kind of radiance. That's him then. Gu Xingyun nodded. "I respect your choice, but I will also respect Qingqing's choice. I'll let her contact Jiang Shangyu for a while. If it's appropriate, I don't mind marrying Qingqing to him." Li Shi glanced at Gu Xingyun indifferently. There was not the slightest bit of emotion in her eyes. Because she knew very well why Gu Xingyun did this. Today, Li Tianlan proved his strength and potential. Today, in Zhongzhou State and even the whole world, countless wealthy and powerful families were paying attention to and even studying this rising heavenly sun. The combat capability of the invincible realm. Although he was only 22 years old, with such strength, how many people would dare to treat him as a young man? Li Tianlan was extremely dazzling. However, no matter how dazzling the light of the bright moon was, there would still be starlight around the moonlight. Wang Shengxiao, who had let go of his pride and preferred to chase after Li Tianlan, had his own light. Jiang Shangyu, who had found his own way, also had his own light. For Kunlun City, in today's maneuver, Gu Xingyun saw the horror of Li Tianlan, but he also recognized Jiang Shangyu's value. By keeping Li Qingqing by his side, Kunlun City now gained the Jiang family, and in the future, it would gain an invincible realm expert whose strength was absolutely not weak. This was all about interests. There was nothing to be touched. However, compared with Li Qingqing's original fate, this result seemed to be much better. Li Shi looked at Gu Xingyun's calm face. After a long silence, she nodded and said, "Qingqing will like it." "Maybe." Gu Xingyun didn't say yes or no. There was another long silence between the two. The small villa arranged by Zhuang Huayang for Gu Xingyun was right in front of him, but Gu Xingyun didn't go in. He just sat casually by the river, watching the river in his sight converge into the sea and rush forward. The river and sea glowed in the night. The light was reflected in Gu Xingyun's pupils, and his eyes looked extremely distant and vast. At this moment, Li Shi keenly noticed that Gu Xingyun's whole body was showing a kind of aura that was completely different from usual. His injury was still serious and almost fatal, but his spirit seemed to have jumped to a higher realm. "Do you want to leave me?" Gu Xingyun suddenly asked. Li Shi's body suddenly tightened, and she looked at Gu Xingyun with great vigilance. She never thought that this man would let her go, and naturally, she didn't think about leaving. "These years, I'm tired. Gu Xingyun looked at the rushing river and sea in his sight, and said flatly, "If you have enough of this life now, I can give you a chance. After Qingqing gets married, leave your sword and martial arts, and you can go with her. Do you think I will believe you?" His eyes were as cold as the winter, without any warmth. Li Shi looked at him with mocking and sarcastic eyes. "Get out. After Qingqing gets married, leave your martial arts and get out as far as possible." Gu Xingyun silently took out a cigarette and lit it. A cigarette burned out. In the sound of coughing, he said in a hoarse voice, "When?" Li Shi asked blankly. "A few more years." Gu Xingyun's tone was cold. In a few years, after his injury recovered, he would really enter the peak of the invincible realm. At that time, Kunlun City would no longer need Li Shi, who had a vague position, or even Gu Qianxuan. He alone was enough to support the whole Kunlun City. That was his glory alone. Li Shi? This kind of woman who represented his shame had better get out as far as possible. "Okay." Li Shi nodded. She looked into the distance, and her voice was very soft. Because it was light, it was soft. Gu Xingyun looked at her. He finally saw a touch of relaxation on the beautiful face that had been numb for many years. It was the longing and yearning after being surrounded by freedom. Gu Xingyun's heart kept sinking. However, a wave of anger that devoured all of his rationality continued to gush out, almost covering his entire body. "What are you going to do after being free?" Gu Xingyun suppressed the anger in his heart and asked calmly. "Atonement." Li Shi said quietly. She would go to many places, including East Island and Heaven Capital. She just wanted to atone. Atonement. The anger in Gu Xingyun's heart finally broke out. He laughed, and his smile was extremely cold. "Yes. You can do whatever you want. Li Shi, I've been focusing on seeking Tao recently. I plan to invite Master Xianxia to solve my doubts. What do you think?" Master Xianxia. Li Shi's body shook violently, and her face suddenly turned pale. She suddenly turned to look at Gu Xingyun. She seemed to be very angry, but that anger was not a hysterical outburst, but a kind of helpless despair. "What are you going to do?" Li Shi asked. "I'm threatening you." Gu Xingyun looked at Li Shi and said in a light tone, "I can give you freedom. But that will be a few years later. As for these years, as the wife of the governor of Kunlun City, you have to do your duty." Li Shi looked at Gu Xingyun, and her body trembled, becoming more and more powerless. "Go to Snow Country." Gu Xingyun squinted and smiled. Such a big thing happened in Samsara Palace. Li Tianlan will definitely go to Snow Country. "Oh, I heard that the Purgatory of Heaven Capital is also in Snow Country?" "Deity, I hate this title. I don't want to know who he is, but this time you go to Snow Country on behalf of Kunlun City. They are all enemies. I will select a group of elites for you. At that time, in addition to getting our interests in Snow Country, I also want the heads of these two people. Li Tianlan. Deity. Neither of these two people can live. Do you understand?" Li Shi's body fell to the ground softly, and the whole person was like an empty shell that had lost its soul. "What happened last night? I won't harass Master Xianxia. You are free, and so is Qingqing." Gu Xingyun looked at Li Shi with a smile. "It's not difficult for you to kill two people, right? It's not that you haven't killed them before. It's nothing more than killing them again." Li Shi looked at Gu Xingyun dully, powerless and desperate. Gu Xingyun reached out and patted her still tender face. He looked into her eyes and said calmly, "It's really pitiful." Mount Dibing. The night rain was hazy. After the maneuver, Wang Tianzong, who directly returned to Beihai from Huading, did not delay. He took Wang Shengxiao and Song Ci back to Mount Dibing at the fastest speed. Wang Shengxiao and Song Ci were seriously injured. Especially Wang Shengxiao. His injury could be said to be the heaviest of all. After Wang Tianzong sent Wang Xingxiao and Song Ci to the dormant room of Mount Dibing at the fastest speed, it was not until the night fell that Wang Xingxiao's vital signs slowly stabilized and he was out of danger. Wang Tianzong calmly put away the immortality potion that was ready to be used at any time and looked at the nutrition cabin in front of him. This was a wide vessel with a length of 4 or 5 meters. It was seamless, and the whole body was shining with a strange metallic luster. There was an oxygen outlet at the front of the vessel, and the whole body was completely closed. Wang Xianxia and Song Ci were half lying in the vessel, hand in hand, surrounded by precious gene potions. They closed their eyes as if they were sleeping, and their breathing was becoming more and more stable. "It's all right." Summer Solstice stood beside Wang Tianzong and looked at the young man and woman in the vessel with soft eyes. Wang Tianzong said yes. "Is it very troublesome for Song Ci?" Summer Solstice suddenly asked. Song Ci's injury was not a big problem, but the problem was that she had abstained before the maneuver, and finally appeared in the lineup to besiege Li Tianlun, which was also breaking the rules. "It's not a big problem." Wang Tianzong shook his head. "They have already won, and they won't hold on to this little thing. I guess now they are all focused on me, and the matter of the little girl is not a big deal." He looked at Song Ci and suddenly said with a smile, "This child is good. Really good." Summer Solstice also laughed. "Sure is also good. Tang Shi and Song Ci, both daughters-in-law, are very good." Wang Tianzong glanced at his wife, took her hand, and drove back to Emperor Hall. The lights were on in Emperor Hall. The document was still on the tea table in the hall. After Summer Solstice finished reading it, she never touched it. Wang Tianzong glanced at the document and looked at Summer Solstice. "Take a bath first." Summer Solstice whispered, "It's all over. Don't worry for the time being." "Say it first." Wang Tianzong shook his head and tidied up the hair on his wife's forehead that was wet by the rain. Xianxia pointed at the information on the tea table and frowned subconsciously. "I can't explain it clearly. There are many things that I don't know. But you should read that information. If that information is true, then Li Tianlun really can't be touched. At the very least, we can't move them for now." Wang Tianzong waved his hands. The document on the coffee table flew up and landed in his palm. "Qin Weibai left it?" Wang Tianzong asked. Xianxia nodded. "You read it first. I'll make tea for you." "All right." Wang Tianzong sat down. On the sofa, he opened the documents in his hands. Summer Solstice went to a small hall and selected some scented tea. She boiled the water unhurriedly. It took about 20 minutes. She estimated that Wang Tianzong had seen enough, and then she returned to the hall with the teacup. Wang Tianzong was still sitting, holding the materials. His posture had not changed at all from before she left. Summer Solstice glanced at her husband's face. Under the soft light, Wang Tianzong's face was taut and his brows were tightly knitted. His eyes were still calm, but there was a kind of irritation that was hard to hide under a closer look. This kind of emotion was obscure, but it was so obvious. The Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, had never shown such obvious negative emotions in the past many years. Summer Solstice put the tea in front of Wang Tianzong and sat quietly beside him. Wang Tianzong held the materials tighter and tighter. Just when he was about to lose control of his emotions, Summer Solstice's voice sounded. "Drink some water first. Why are you so angry?" Wang Tianzong glanced at her, forced a smile, and reached out to pick up the teacup. The cold air rose from his palm, and a cup of hot tea instantly became cold. Wang Tianzong drank up the tea in one gulp. "Everything on the materials is true, right?" Summer Solstice asked softly. Wang Tianzong nodded silently. He was silent for a long time before he said, "How did you get the materials?" "The materials came from Qin Weibai." Needless to say. But Wang Tianzong was confused about where did Qin Weibai get the materials? The information on this document was neither too much nor too little, but the content was extremely simple. The entire materials recorded more than 60 projects with an investment of more than 10 billion yuan that the Wang family of Beihai had invested in all over the world. Among them, the largest projects had an investment quota of more than 100 billion yuan. More than 60 projects involved a wide range of fields, including steel, oil, mining, military, real estate, finance, automobiles, roads and bridges, civil aviation, ships, new energy. He had dabbled in countless fields. The information provided by Qin Weibai was about the things that could not be exposed to the public in these projects, or the most advanced technologies. That was simply the biggest weakness that could be used against him. Wang Tianzong could be sure that if this material did not appear here but was completely exposed, the Wang family of Beihai's investments in various places would directly lose at least 1 trillion yuan in less than a month. The market value of its major listed groups and multinational groups would evaporate even more unimaginably. The most important thing was that once this material was made public, the Wang family of Beihai would lose the trust of a considerable number of partners, and the overall economic strength of the Wang family of Beihai would suffer an unprecedented blow. All the consequences on Mount Dibing would definitely affect not only the Wang family of Beihai, but also tens of millions of people in the entire Beihai province. Beihai province belonged to Zhongzhou state, but this most special province actually belonged to the Wang family of Beihai. Beihai people all over the world would say that they were from Beihai, not Beihai people of Zhongzhou state, no matter where they went. Among all the provinces in Zhongzhou state, only the people of Beihai province had this kind of pride. This was equivalent to a rather thorough one country, two system. The independence of Beihai province was far greater than any autonomous region in Zhongzhou state. Once the economy of the Wang family of Beihai was hit hard, it would be a complete disaster for Beihai province. The allowance of hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the Beihai Corps was reduced. The military budget was reduced. The treatment of civil servants in Beihai was reduced. The budgets of various cutting-edge scientific research projects were reduced. The funds of various intelligence agencies and special warfare agencies of the Wang family of Beihai were reduced. Beihai Bank raised interest rates. Taxes increased. Prices rose, and so on. Of course, to some extent, this situation could not happen. As long as Wang Tianzong asked for help from Zhongzhou state. Zhongzhou state would not hesitate to provide a lot of support, but it would also not hesitate to take away part of the leadership of Beihai province. Whether it was the possible disaster or the consequences of asking for help from Zhongzhou state, Wang Tianzong could not accept it. Absolutely unacceptable. Unimaginable consequences? If he killed Li Tianlan today, Qin Weibai would make all this information public, and the consequences would be more than unimaginable. But the question was, where did Qin Weibai get this information? Where did she get it? Wang Tianzong's inner irritation kept surging, and his eyes became extremely cold. Qing, summer solstice reminded him calmly. Wang Tianzong shook his head. He doesn't dare to joke about the foundation of Beihai province. And even if he is really willing to give it, he doesn't know most of the things in it. Summer solstice still wanted to say something, but then she shook her head. The current economy of the Wang family of Beihai was controlled by Tangshi. Only she and Wang Tianzong knew many top-secret projects. But it was also impossible for her to betray the Wang family of Beihai. It was absolutely impossible. Where on earth did Qin Weibai get this information? Wang Tianzong took a big drag on the cigarette and said nothing. This information could be said to be an absolute trump card, and its weight was even more useful than several invincible realm experts standing in front of Wang Tianzong. It's okay. After smoking a cigarette sullenly, Wang Tianzong threw away the cigarette butt. At least it's a good thing that this information hasn't been made public. Is there no other way? Summer solstice looked at Wang Tianzong. The information hadn't been made public. But this information was like a sharp sword in the hands of the enemy, which really made people restless. Of course there is a way. Wang Tianzong shook his head. But Li Tianlan may have to live for a while. He knocked on the information in his hand. The problems here are more complicated. Many of them are black box operations and power money transactions. Once they are made public, the reputation of the Wang family of Beihai will decline, its strength will be damaged, and the Wang family of Beihai will have many twists and turns, and we will also offend many good partners. Many of Xianxia's operating methods are relatively radical, but they are effective and profitable. The key is that she does it very safely. Even if there are some problems, they will not be known, let alone should not be known. But Qin Weibai knows. Summer solstice said softly. I'm also wondering about this problem. Wang Tianzong said, but it doesn't matter. What is written in this information are all hidden dangers. This is indeed the most deadly threat, but since it is a hidden danger, it can naturally be eliminated. But I need time, at most half a year, and the problem above will no longer be a problem. He looked at the information in his hand and whispered to himself, what if I let him live for another half a year? He threw the information on the table, took out his mobile phone, and directly dialed Xianming's number. Your Majesty. On the phone, Xianming's tone was calm. There is one thing that you need to check in person. Wang Tianzong said. Your Majesty, please tell me. Xianming's voice remained unchanged. Although he had not participated in the specific operation of the intelligence agency in recent years and was only responsible for controlling the overall situation, it did not mean that his ability had declined. Check Qin Weibai. There is something wrong with this person. Within a month, I want all her information, dig deep, and start from her childhood. Didn't the information say that she was born in the southwest? Then start from the southwest 20 years ago. Wang Tianzong said calmly, I want all her information. You go ahead and do it at all costs. Genius 1 second to remember this website's address. Mobile version. Chapter 387. When there was a victory, there would naturally be a celebration. The celebration banquet of the East Emperor Palace came to an end at dusk when the night was getting dark. After turning off Yu's private kitchen, Yu Donglai, who rarely cooked in person. The East Emperor Palace ushered in the busiest day since its establishment. Before yesterday, this manor built in the beautiful suburbs of Huading still had the sign of Han Yu Palace hanging on it. The name of East Emperor Palace was more like the recognition in the hearts of some of its own people. When the maneuver was over and the celebration banquet came to an end, Li Tianlan personally hung the plaque with the words, East Emperor Palace, written by him 3 years ago in front of the gate. Li Beidian, who was seriously injured and drunk, sat in a wheelchair and looked at this scene. He squinted and pulled Su Chu, who was pale beside him, and smirked. This plaque was stolen from first senior brother after I got him drunk in Mount Shu. Isn't it domineering? It's not too late to hang it up now. I'll go back to Mount Shu in 2 days and bring some elite swordsmen down the mountain. The East Emperor Palace is officially established. After everyone graduates, the framework should be set up as soon as possible. Old Su, you are the first senior brother of Jade Pool. Don't you plan to trick some people from Jade Pool to come over? It depends on the marshal and the little junior sister. Su Chu shook his head honestly. His situation was completely different from Li Baitian's. The first senior brother of Jade Pool had a high status, but in the end he was just a junior. At least at present, he had no right to bring the brothers of Jade Pool to the East Emperor Palace. But Li Baitian was different. He was very young, but in terms of seniority, he was an absolute elder. The great Void Sword Master of Mount Shu could be said to be one of the 4 main forces of Mount Shu. Thousands of swordsmen in Mount Shu practiced swordsmanship on the mountain, dreaming of being accepted as a disciple by a certain sword master. Li Beidian was now in the thunder-shocking realm and barely qualified to form his own sect in Mount Shu. The people he selected were all his disciples when they left Mount Shu. Joining the East Emperor Palace was just a matter of a word from Li Beidian. With such an identity, Su Chu could not compare at all. Only Dongqing Rushi or Dongqing Wudi could do it. Especially the latter. Most of the elders in Mount Shu, including the sect leader, had to call Dongqing Wudi senior brother when they saw him. Now, some things can indeed be done. Dongqing Wudi glanced at Li Beidian and said with a smile, but you've just started, so you'd better be careful about the candidates. The quality of your swordsmen in Mount Shu is not bad. But in your current situation, a East Emperor Palace with 200 core members is already the limit of operation. Before you grow stronger, the East Emperor Palace needs absolute elites. I will make arrangements for that as well. Taishu, you have to be careful when you choose. Dongqing Wudi said. Great Void. The corner of Li Baitian's mouth twitched as he cursed in his heart. He nodded and said, I will discuss it with Tianlan. Dongqing Wudi nodded with a smile and looked at Li Tianlan, who was fixing the plaque under the light. The celebration feast was coming to an end. But the party was not destined to end. This day could be said to be a crucial day for Li Tianlan. He established his position in Zhongzhou State with his own strength. East Emperor Palace officially appeared in Zhongzhou State. The Dongqing clan, Sai City, the Li family, Mount Shu, Jade Pool, and even the government of Zhongzhou State would select the most trustworthy talents to join East Emperor Palace and build the strongest power framework in the shortest time. Tonight was just the beginning. If the Yuzhou conference some time ago was the beginning of the Li family's comeback, then tonight was the beginning of Li Tianlan and East Emperor Palace. It had nothing to do with anything. Dongqing Wudi glanced at Lin Yuxian, who was standing aside and smiling quietly. The Lin clan was little known in the dark world. But for people at Dongqing Wudi's level, it was naturally not a big secret. But in the past many years, in Dongqing Wudi's impression, the concept of the Lin clan was actually very general. Even Dongqing Wudi did not think the concept of the Lin clan was so real. This was a group all over the world. They could be found in South America, North America, Eurasia, and even Australia in the Southern Hemisphere. In any place, they were not strong enough to control the situation. But everywhere, they had an influence that could not be ignored. They would cooperate with each other, but the connection was extremely messy. They were not united with each other. They annexed each other and had many conspiracies. This was a behemoth that was completely different from the Wang family of Beihai. All the branches of the Wang family of Beihai were in Beihai province. They built Beihai province into an iron plate, vaguely with the meaning of China. With the Wang family of Beihai as the core, they influenced Zhongzhou State and established the Southeast Group. Finally, after Zhongzhou State became a behemoth that could easily influence the overall situation, their influence began to radiate all over the world. The entire Wang family of Beihai was like a towering tree rooted in Zhongzhou State, covering the sky and the sun. On the other hand, the so-called Lin clan was like a forest, spreading branches and leaves all over the world, and basically, there was no connection between them. They also had vicious competition with each other and even fought to the death. There were no constraints between them and they could do whatever they wanted. 3 years ago, when Lin Fengting went to Zhongzhou State, Dongqing Wudi knew the headquarters of the Lin clan in Switzerland. If it were not for the existence of the headquarters of the Lin clan, in the eyes of Dongqing Wudi, the so-called Lin clan was a group of wealthy families and successful businessmen, or politicians and warlords scattered all over the world. The only thing they had in common was that they all had the surname Lin. The people in the headquarters of the Lin clan did not make money, do business, engage in politics, or engage in intelligence. They did not have to do anything. The patriarch of each generation of the Lin clan did not need to be the so-called great talent and strategy, wisdom, and martial arts. The entire Lin clan had only one requirement for the patriarch. That was, the patriarch must be an absolute strong man. That was the patron saint of the entire Lin clan. When any branch of the Lin clan encountered an irresistible external threat, the patron saint of the headquarters of the Lin clan was obliged to help his own branch solve the trouble. The solution could be to use force to suppress them. It could also mobilize the resources of other branches to fight against external forces together. This was the power of the patriarch of the Lin clan. It could be seen and touched. Everyone in the Lin clan could break away from the headquarters and form a new branch on their own. The headquarters gave the branch not only shelter in times of crisis, but also an unimaginable sum of money. But such shelter and giving were not free. Any group or family established by an independent branch would hand over 20% of its benefits to the headquarters, and it would be handed in permanently and passed on from generation to generation. If they did not agree to this clause at the beginning, no one would get the money. Even if they reneged halfway, the Lin clan would recover the initial funds according to the interest according to the original agreement and cancel the protection of the branch. Every year, the headquarters of the Lin clan would take 20% of the total income of each branch. These interests were placed in the headquarters of the Lin clan, which was too lazy to invest or even spend money. It was a huge cash flow that was enough to make anyone crazy. The people of the Lin clan who attempted to set up a branch would get a sum of their own funds from these cash flows. In this way, There would be more and more branches of the Lin clan, and the income of the headquarters would also increase. The resources that the patriarch could mobilize and the responsibilities on his shoulders would also increase. Eventually, it would become a very delicate cycle. This was a quite novel operation model. For hundreds of years, the model of the Lin clan continued to mature. Until today, for so many years, even though the Wang family of Beihai would have an extremely bloody massacre every few decades or hundreds of years, the Lin clan had always been stable. The major branches would fight against each other, but the Lin clan had never had any disaster that would engulf the whole clan. They spread out all over the world, and they would not have the power to say anything in any place. But their hidden strength under the water was enough to ensure the stability and interests of the whole clan. The Wang family of Beihai. The Lin clan. Two completely different modes of operation and two completely different attitudes toward life. This was the rule set by their ancestors. The only chosen one ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years seemed to always have an unparalleled aggressiveness. He hoped that his descendants would move forward with increasing responsibilities, with absolute force and power, and always stand at the top of the world, overlooking all the others. Therefore, most of the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai were peerless heroes. However, the patriarchs of the Lin clan just quietly guarded their growing Lin clan. They were calm, stable, and leisurely. Dongqing Wudi had studied the Wang family of Beihai and the Lin clan in detail. He could not evaluate the state of mind of the two ancestors. But today, he could be sure that the overall strength of the Lin clan would not be weaker than that of the Wang family of Beihai, which was highly concentrated in power. At least, it would not be much worse. Dongqing Wudi knew the identity of Lin Yuxian. Dongqing Wudi was surprised and pleasantly surprised that Li Tianlan and Lin Yuxian were involved with the Lin clan. The East Emperor Palace was established. If the Lin clan was willing to introduce some talents to the East Emperor Palace, Li Tianlan's future would undoubtedly be broader. Whoosh! The dull sound of breaking through the air rang out. Countless fireworks rose in the East Emperor Palace. Dongqing Wudi came to his senses. In his sight, Li Tianlan had fixed the plaque of the East Emperor Palace in front of the door. All the lights of the East Emperor Palace were turned off. Rows of fireworks rose high into the sky, shining in the night. It seemed that they would never stop. The entire East Emperor Palace was transformed into a hazy and blurred brilliance in the blooming fireworks. Except for Li Beidian, who was still sitting in a wheelchair, Li Tianlan was lifted up by everyone. They shouted the East Emperor Palace and threw Li Tianlan into the sky again and again. Li Tianlan's hearty laughter rang out in the aftermath of the fireworks, so clear and so relaxed. Dongqing Wudi stared at Li Tianlan quietly. His smile and eyes were soft. Finally, he sighed quietly. "Dad, everything is on track." In the gentle voice, Dongqing Qiuqi, one of the 13 directors of Huading, came over. "You don't seem very happy. How come?" Dongqing Wudi laughed. "I just feel. The decisive god of massacre hesitated, but he didn't know how to describe his feelings. "Do you feel guilty?" Dongqing Qiuqi stared at her father's face. Dongqing Wudi was stunned. He reached out and touched his daughter's head. "What about Uncle Zhonghu and the others?" Dongqing Qiuqi glanced at the crowd. In the crowd, the tall Li Zhonghu was particularly eye-catching. The Major General, who had been in the Border Control Corps for nearly 30 years and was only Dongqing Wudi's bodyguard at the beginning, huddled with a group of young people, laughing boldly and happily. "I'll make arrangements," Dongqing Wudi said. Not only Li Zhonghu. Today, Dongqing Wudi had to make proper arrangements for the 40,000 people from the 4 armies of the Border Control Corps. "It's not easy." Dongqing Qiuqi frowned slightly. "Today's matter is very complicated. Wang Tianzong wants to kill Tianlan, which is a violation of the rules. But you mobilize the army, which is even more against the rules. The giant group and the academics will now target Wang Tianzong, but you will also become the target of the Southeast Group and the Special Warfare Group. It is estimated that the decision-making committee will hold an emergency plenary meeting no later than tomorrow." "Don't worry." Dongqing Wudi shook his head. "I'm mentally prepared." This time, it's not a problem for me. This time, it really can't shake you, Dongcheng Chiochi said, but after this meeting, the youngest marshal in Zhongzhou state will appear, right? Dongcheng Wudi narrowed his eyes and thought of the double thunder veins of the Wang family of Beihai. Dijiang. He was currently the most likely candidate to be the new commander of the Border Control Corps. Dongcheng Wudi knew the pattern of the Wang family of Beihai. In each generation of the Wang family of Beihai, there would be at least 2 experts at the peak of the invincible realm. This generation was Wang Tianzong and Summer Solstice. However, Summer Solstice's state was a little special. After hurting her foundation, Wang Tianzong had borne everyone's responsibility for many years. What about the next generation? Wang Xianxia was bound to be one of them. But the other expert at the peak of the invincible realm might be Song Ci. But at present, the biggest possibility was Dijiang. After a strike at the lower realm, Wang Xianxiao's realm regressed, and Dijiang would even reach the peak of the invincible realm earlier than Wang Xianxiao. As expected, Dongcheng Wudi said calmly. He thought of Dijiang, but his eyes always fell on Li Tianlan. The phone rang. Dongcheng Wudi took out his mobile phone and raised his eyebrows when he saw the number on the phone. The sound of fireworks kept ringing out. Dongcheng Wudi walked into East Emperor Palace and answered the phone. Dongcheng Chiochi quietly followed her father. The phone call lasted a short time. But Dongcheng Chiochi clearly saw that her father's face became gloomy almost at a speed visible to the naked eye. He silently hung up the phone and glanced at Dongcheng Chiochi. Call Tunlan here. What happened? Dongcheng Chiochi asked subconsciously. Dongcheng Wudi shook his head, gritted his teeth, and said, Snow Country. It was the night of July 31st in Zhongzhou State. It was the morning of August 1st in Snow Country. After the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, the turbulent situation in Eastern Europe finally exploded. The intelligence organization of the Jiang family of South America finally determined the location of the largest group of elites of Samsara Palace in Snow Country. Jiang Qiansong, the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, personally hunted them down. The Dark Knights protected the retreat of the largest group of elites of Samsara Palace. The chief of Knights Templars, Chaos, an expert of the Invincible Realm, and Jiang Qiansong joined forces. The 2 experts of the Invincible Realm slaughtered nearly half of the elites of Samsara Palace and the Dark Knights in one fell swoop. The battle took place in the capital of Im in Eastern Europe. No one knew whether it was a coincidence or intentional. The place where the battle detonated happened to be near the garrison base of Zhongzhou State in Im. The crazy flames of war spread everywhere in Im. More than 3,000 of the more than 10,000 garrison troops of Zhongzhou State in Im were killed or wounded. The Im government conveyed the news to Zhongzhou State as soon as possible. The high-level officials of Zhongzhou State were furious and decided to hold a high-level meeting at the first time. All the 9 directors attended. In this high-level meeting, in addition to all the high-level officials, 3 people were specially invited. One was Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, Wang Tianzong, who was famous in the Dark World. The other was Dijiang, the first disciple of Wang Tianzong. The last one was Li Tianlan. Phone Poli. Genius 1 second to remember the address of this website. Mobile version M. Chapter 388. Midsummer in August. When it was almost 5 a.m., Yuzhou province had already been dimly lit. The carnival in Huading continued. Dongcheng Wudi and Li Tianlan had arrived in Yuzhou from Huading. The meeting was scheduled for 6:30 in the morning. There were still 2 hours left. At that time, President Li Huaqing of Zhongzhou State, who was visiting Star State, would probably be able to return to Yuzhou. Some members of the decision-making committee outside Yuzhou could also arrive at the venue. A black Mercedes-Benz drove slowly on Chang'an Street. In the glimmer of dawn, Li Tianlan sat behind the Mercedes-Benz and quietly looked at the mobile phone in his hand. On the screen was still a photo of him and Qin Weibai snuggling together in the Sky Academy 3 years ago. The screen lit up. No calls, no text messages. Li Tianlan stared at the phone, becoming more and more silent. Still no news? Dongqing Wudi patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder and said in a gentle voice, "Don't worry too much. It happened suddenly, and there are many things to deal with. Isn't the patron saint of the Lin clan with Boss Qin? It'll be fine." Li Tianlan nodded silently and dialed Qin Weibai's number again. Emotionless English came through the phone. If translated into Chinese, it would probably mean that the call could not be connected. Qin Weibai's phone could not be connected. Lin Fengting and Flaming Fire also could not get through. Li Tianlan's eyebrows twitched slightly. He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. The storm in Eastern Europe continued to spread around the world. The capital of Im has now become the focus of the world's attention, and countless news radiates all over the world, true and false, chaotic. The garrison of Xianxia state in Im had barely completed the repair. At this time, it was confirmed that nearly 1,000 garrison troops had died, nearly 2,000 soldiers were injured, and hundreds of people were missing. The largest group of elites of the Samsara Palace hidden in Snow Country was almost wiped out. The first group of elites of the Dark Knights, which had always had a good relationship with the Samsara Palace, also suffered heavy casualties when they arrived in Eastern Europe. The Jiang family of South America and Knights Templars were also injured, but with two invincible realm experts holding the line, their losses were negligible compared to the Samsara Palace and the Dark Knights. What Li Tianlan wanted to know most now was how Qin Weibai, who was also in Snow Country, was doing. He knew that Qin Weibai was in Snow Country, but he was not sure if Qin Weibai was with the elites of Samsara Palace. His mind was in a mess. Li Tianlan shook his head hard, pursed his lips, and looked out of the window. The morning sun rose in Yuzhou. Under the faint golden sunlight, it was a calm and indifferent yet extremely dangerous face. "You are confused because you care too much." Dongqing Wudi shook his head. "Even the higher-ups of Xianxia state have more confidence in Boss Qin than you do. Han Dun and Jiang Qiansong are indeed invincible, but even if the two of them join forces, they won't be a match for Lin Fengting. What are you worried about?" "I'm not worried about Lin Fengting," Li Tianlan said calmly. He had seen Lin Fengting's sword. Even now, he still could not estimate that kind of strength, so Lin Fengting would definitely be fine. However, his strength did not mean that it was Qin Weibai's strength. In this chaotic battle, if Lin Fengting were to be careless, it's good news that there's no news from Boss Qin. Xianxia state has more than a garrison in Im. Our strength there is still good. We didn't get any information about Boss Qin, which probably means that Boss Qin is not in Im at all. I think this is also the reason why we specially invited you to attend this high-level meeting. Dongqing Wudi said. "Reason?" Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He really didn't understand why he was invited to this high-level meeting. "Because of your relationship with the Samsara Palace." Dongqing Wudi said slowly, "Wang Tianzong destroyed the headquarters of the Samsara Palace with one sword stroke. The palace master died, and the Samsara Palace was leaderless and suffered heavy losses. But the basic framework of the Samsara Palace is still there. They occupy some resources abroad, rich contacts, special channels, especially the intelligence system. The intelligence system of the Samsara Palace is simply unparalleled in the world. In a short time, it is difficult for these to completely disappear with the death of the master of the Samsara Palace." Dongqing Wudi looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. "What's more, everyone knows the particularity of the Samsara Palace. The palace master trusts Qin Weibai 100%. When the will of the palace master remains silent, Qin Weibai's will is the will of the Samsara Palace. And Qin Weibai is your woman." "So?" Li Tianlan was expressionless. He had understood something. "So the death of the master of the Samsara Palace has a great impact on the Samsara Palace, but it can be said that it is not very big, because too many things are controlled by Qin Weibai. At present, if any superpower annexes the current Samsara Palace, it may lead to the extreme expansion of their strength and influence. The current Eastern Europe is simply full of benefits and opportunities for the Dark World. The right to speak in the Dark World of Eastern Europe, the incomplete Polar Ground Alliance and the Samsara Palace, the advance and retreat of countless powerful families, and the direction of the situation of more than a dozen countries in Eastern Europe in the future will make people completely lose their minds. You are invited to attend this high-level meeting. Obviously, the government has taken the Samsara Palace as a target and intends to swallow it first. Dong Qingwudi looked at Li Tianlan's face and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. What a good appetite! Li Tianlan's tone was cold. For the Samsara Palace, this is not a bad thing. Dong Qingwudi said meaningfully, you are in Zhongzhou State. It is very convenient for the high level to contact the Samsara Palace through you, but it also means that a lot of things can be discussed. The Samsara Palace is weak because they have lost the Palace Master. But if they have the support of Zhongzhou State, the strength of Zhongzhou State's support may not be less than that of an invincible realm expert. If the two sides reach an agreement, the Samsara Palace should be able to be the overseas force of Zhongzhou State under the condition of ensuring a certain degree of independence. This is good for you, for Zhongzhou State, and for the Samsara Palace. Like East Island and Night Spirit before? Li Tianlan asked. Almost. Dong Qingwudi nodded. I invited you to this meeting in the hope that you can persuade Qin Weibai. Boss Qin is a goddess in the eyes of others, high and unfathomable, but she can't refuse your request. If this matter is settled, the strength of Zhongzhou State will be enhanced, and it will be a great contribution to you. He paused and continued, and this time, I can guarantee that out of public interest, the resources of the Samsara Palace will not be shared with the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. There was one more sentence he didn't say. If it was out of public interest, it would naturally not let Li Tianlan lead. If Li Tianlan led the Samsara Palace, he was afraid that the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City would desperately oppose it. This huge force would eventually serve the country in the purest way. The real leader could only be an absolute neutral force that did not participate in the internal affairs of Zhongzhou State at all. Zhongzhou State, the Terracotta Army, the 4 spirit generals. Li Tianlan was silent. If this was the case, it was really not a bad thing for the Samsara Palace and himself. But the truth was not so. He glanced at Dong Qingwudi. He found that Dong Qingwudi's eyes were also shining with the light of excitement. Li Tianlan smiled. If it were before yesterday, he might still have some hesitation. But after the maneuver, the connection between him and the Dongqing clan could no longer be separated, so naturally, he didn't need to avoid anything. In the headquarters of the Samsara Palace, it was Shadowless who died. Li Tianlan said. At this moment he suddenly thought of the text message that Qin Weibai sent him. After the headquarters of the Samsara Palace was destroyed, the whole Samsara would turn from bright to dark. Was the destruction of a large number of elites of the Samsara Palace just part of the plan of the Samsara Palace? Li Tianlan's thought just came up, and then it was extinguished. How could such a big sacrifice be possible? What do you mean? Dong Qingwudi froze for a moment and didn't understand. It means that the master of Samsara Palace didn't die. Li Tianlan whispered, she is in the dark. Snow Country. Mormons. In the cold but extremely luxurious manor, Qin Weibai stood quietly in front of the fountain in the main villa of the manor, looking at the water rushing into the sky with no expression on her face. Even in the middle of summer, even in the polar night, Mormons was still extremely cold. But Qin Weibai wore very thin clothes. Black straight pants, boots, and a thin white sweater. In the open-air environment where the temperature was close to 0 degrees, she stood motionless, looking like a statue. Her thin clothing accentuated her figure perfectly. Front and back, left and right. No matter from which angle, it was a beautiful scene, but it was so beautiful that people didn't dare to look at it directly. Occasionally, people came in and out of the manor, but no one dared to look at Qin Weibai. From a human's aesthetic point of view, she was indeed extremely beautiful, but at this moment, her entire body exuded a powerful aura that kept people away from her. It was not the so-called martial arts domain formed by sword intent and strength. It was a pure aura, piercingly cold, inviolable. Flaming fire stood less than 10 meters away from Qin Weibai without saying a word. She held Qin Weibai's coat with both hands and also said nothing. She had been with her boss for many years, but she rarely saw her boss in such a state at this time. In such a state, even the person beside her did not dare to say a word. Qin Weibai had been standing here for nearly 40 minutes. The near-zero temperature was a little cold, but it made people sober. She stood there motionlessly, and her face was still flushed with anger. Li Donlon guessed right. Such a great sacrifice was just part of Samsara Palace's turning from light to dark. It was really impossible. The Jiang family of South America's raid wiped out the largest group of elites of Samsara Palace in Snow Country. This was completely out of Qin Weibai's plan. In the final battle of Snow Country, there were few supermasters that Samsara Palace could use. However, the 12 supermasters were not all the assets of Samsara Palace. They were only the superiors at the peak of the Thundershocking realm. Samsara Palace naturally had some Thundershocking realm experts who were slightly weaker. The group of Samsara Palace elites in had more than 1,000 people. Whether in terms of overall combat capability or number, it could be said to be the top priority of Samsara Palace. More than a dozen Thundershocking realm experts, nearly 200 Fire-Flaming realm experts, and some technicians were wiped out overnight. Even Qin Weibai couldn't bear such a heavy loss. What made her even angrier was that Samsara Palace had a unique intelligence agency in the world, but she got the news later than any other force in the world. This was obviously a cooperation between multiple forces. The Jiang family of South America and Knights Templars were only responsible for taking action, but there were obviously other forces secretly mobilizing the national resources of Snow Country. All the communication signals in Mormon City were completely blocked for nearly 5 hours. By the time Samsara Palace realized that something was wrong and used their connections to lift the city signal block, the news of Samsara Palace's heavy loss had spread all over the world. Until now, Qin Weibai had not yet found out what had gone wrong, so that the group of elites had completely exposed their whereabouts. In just one more day, the elites could take them as their base, and eventually break up and disperse to all corners of Eastern Europe. But when everything was ready, the raid of the Jiang family of South America could be said to be a real blow to the head. The largest force in Qin Weibai's hand was broken up. She was bound to adjust her plan again in the next time. Time was so tight. Qin Weibai felt the pressure that almost made her breathless at the first time. The phone suddenly rang. Flaming Fire took out the phone from Qin Weibai's coat and looked at the caller ID. The note on the caller ID was very simple. It was not the husband that many young people liked to note. It was not my dear. It was not any intimate address. It was him. There was only one word. Flaming Fire's eyes lit up. She walked quickly to Qin Weibai and whispered, "Boss, it's a call from His Highness Tianlong." Qin Weibai froze for a moment, took a deep breath, and adjusted her emotions. Her fingers were still trembling a little because of anger, but her eyes had softened in a very short time. She thought about it, hung up the phone, opened the communication software, and sent a video communication to Li Tianlong. The video was connected in the fastest time. Li Tianlong's face appeared on the screen of the phone. Qin Weibai looked down at the face on the screen. After a few seconds, she laughed softly. "What's wrong? Do you miss me? I heard about where are you?" Li Tianlong's focused eyes seemed to relax a little, and he asked softly. Qin Weibai's eyes flickered and she said calmly, "I'm not in I'm. It was a little late when I got the news, and it was too late to do anything. It's my mistake." She was still very angry, but her eyes were extremely gentle. This kind of anger and affection mixed together made her look different from all her usual postures, and she looked a little aggrieved. No matter how strong a woman was, in front of the man she loved, she would be weak and fragile. Li Tianlong's heart trembled and he said without hesitation, "I'll go to Snow Country." Qin Weibai's eyes changed, and she said instinctively. Li Tianlong stopped talking, just looked at Qin Weibai's face across the screen. "It's too messy here. It's not a good place for you. Honey, will you go to Tiannan?" Qin Weibai said cautiously. "You're in Snow Country. How can I rest assured if I don't go?" Li Tianlong looked at her and whispered, "The more dangerous it is, the more I want to go, unless you come back now." Qin Weibai held the phone and murmured, "I can't leave." Li Tianlan smiled and nodded. It's good that you're fine. Wait for me in Snow Country. The screen paused. The video was hung up immediately. Qin Weibai held the phone and was silent for a long time. When the maneuver was about to begin, she let the headquarters of Samsara Palace sink into the deep sea because she didn't want Li Tianlan to get out. She never doubted that Li Tianlan could win the maneuver, but she felt that he would be seriously injured and then unable to participate in the general trend of Snow Country. But Li Tianlan was not injured. She didn't want Li Tianlan to come to Snow Country. But Li Tianlan hung up the phone. He also didn't want the elites of Samsara Palace in Snow Country to be exposed. But now that group of elites had been completely annihilated. The general trend of Eastern Europe was in chaos. The superpowers and the governments of big countries that were qualified to play here were quietly involved. Some people might be extremely smart, with great wisdom close to that of a demon. But no one had ever been able to truly control the world. So the overall situation that Qin Weibai controlled began to get out of control little by little. This was destined to be just the beginning. And as time went on, in the general trend, maybe all the forces would slowly get out of control. No one could control everything. The key to how the general trend tilted was to see how the chess player played every card in his hand after the situation was out of control. Qin Weibai handed the phone to Flaming Fire. She seemed to really calm down. Tianlan is coming? A voice suddenly sounded. Lin Fengting appeared behind Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai nodded and said yes. What's your plan? Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai and asked. Qin Weibai was silent for a long time before she slowly said, It's good that we don't see each other. It was good that they didn't see each other. She spoke very slowly, and there seemed to be an unforgettable power between the lines. Lin Fengting stopped talking. Go to the basement. After saying this, Qin Weibai turned and walked directly into the main villa of the manor. There was an extremely hidden passage in the corner of the main villa. The passage was very narrow. It went all the way down, deep and winding. Qin Weibai walked in front. Lin Fengting was behind. Flaming Fire was the last. The three of them walked in the passage for nearly 5 minutes. The narrow passage gradually widened. The passage widened, and the top of their heads became higher. At the end of the passage was a huge hall made entirely of metal. A house was built in the middle of the hall. There were no windows in the house, only one door. The 4 walls of the house, including the door panel, were made of alloy metal, with a thickness of tens of meters, which looked magnificent. A majestic prison cell. Qin Weibai walked to the door of the cell and said calmly, Open the door. A staff member in the hall opened the door. A huge roar, like a magic sound, suddenly rushed out of the cell, extremely crazy and violent. In the cell stood a burly figure with heavy metal shackles all over his body. He was at least 2 meters tall, so burly that he was almost huge. The metal shackles fixed his hands and feet. He was covered in blood, his eyes were red, and he was listless. But the whole person was still full of an indescribable majesty and anger. Seeing Qin Weibai standing in front of the door, a trace of killing intent and anger flashed in his eyes. In a crazy roar, he took a step forward. The metal shackles seemed to be extremely heavy. His figure swayed and he almost fell to the ground. But he still tried his best to move forward again. Qin Weibai reached out a hand. Her slender and fair fingers pressed on a metal button beside the door. The innermost wall of the metal cell suddenly lit up. The giant with the metal shackles suddenly roared, but his body flew uncontrollably. Bang! In the dull sound, his whole body was directly sucked to the wall. As the button was pressed, the whole cell became a huge magnet. The giant with the metal shackles was sucked to the wall, and it was extremely difficult for him to move. Lin Fengting appeared beside Qin Weibai. The giant's eyes stared at Lin Fengting. His eyes were angry, but the whole person gradually calmed down. Qin Weibai pressed another button. The lit wall suddenly went out, and the shackles on the giant were completely opened. He fell to the ground with unprecedented freedom. He seemed to be stunned and didn't know what to do for a moment. You have 2 choices. Qin Weibai's cold voice sounded, clear and sweet. First, kill your way out of here. You may kill me, but it is more likely that Mr. Lin will kill you. Everything you have will become non-existent. Second, crawl out of here. Be my dog and crawl to the place where you should go. You will get my promise, the promise at the beginning. The giant looked at Qin Weibai angrily. Qin Weibai looked into his eyes without fear. In the oppressive and almost suffocating silence, the giant clenched his fists. He wanted to rush out, but in the end, his huge body crawled down and took a step forward. Pa! A black pill was thrown out of Qin Weibai's hand and rolled in front of the giant, extremely dazzling. It. Qin Weibai ordered. Chapter 389. Li Tianlan was on the way. Di Jiang was also on the way. The time of the high-level meeting of the Zhongzhou Decision-Making Committee was never public, but it was never confidential. Therefore, almost every high-level meeting would attract a large number of domestic and foreign media attention. And it was just limited to attention. No media could step into the high-level meeting room. All they could do was vaguely grasp the direction of the general trend of Zhongzhou State from the venue of the meeting, the personnel adjustment after the meeting, and the content of the meeting notice. August 1st, Zhongzhou State decided to hold a high-level meeting in the building of the army headquarters instead of the Hidden Dragon Sea. In the case of heavy casualties in the garrison in Am, Zhongzhou State responded immediately and held the meeting in the building of the army headquarters. It was to let the world see the strength and iron blood of this world's superpower. This was destined to be a high-level meeting of a standard no less than the Yuzhou Conference some time ago. Whether internally or externally. Externally, Zhongzhou State would formally show its attitude to the upheaval in Eastern Europe. Internally, Zhongzhou State, especially the military, would usher in a major personnel transfer. The final maneuver of the two academies was the fuse. The competition of several young people represented the wrestling of several large groups. Whether they won or lost, everything would change. The general trend of Zhongzhou State would also enter a new balance and starting point. As the second master of the Wang family of Beihai on the surface, Di Jiang was destined to be the most eye-catching role in this meeting. This time, he was specially invited to attend the high-level meeting. What about next time? Would he sit there above board? Di Jiang didn't think about this. He had always been a person who didn't like to fantasize. Anything that had not been finalized had the possibility of accidents for him. So he never had expectations for things that had not happened. Without expectations, his heart would be really calm. From his standpoint, he didn't need any far-sighted vision and pattern. He would rather focus on what was in front of him and control everything he could see. Di Jiang was watching the video. The pure black Rolls-Royce was getting closer and closer to the building of the army headquarters. On the laptop screen, the video of the team maneuver of the two academies was playing repeatedly. Di Jiang watched Li Tianlan walk into the woods. In the clear picture, he broke a branch in the mottled sun. At that moment, two figures appeared clearly on the screen. One was Li Tianlan, holding a branch. The other was completely blurred and almost transparent, but the general outline was exactly the same as Li Tianlan's. Two figures, left and right. An incredible exclamation could even be heard on the screen. Di Jiang watched quietly. His eyes were calm and focused. He saw a branch easily overwhelm Fan Haoyu of the Thundershocking realm. He saw the Heaven Punishment Sword formation with Chen Moshue as the core. He saw the brilliant sword light that covered everything in the Heaven Punishment Sword formation. He saw the green leaf falling from the sword light. The green leaf distorted space with sword intent, turning into a transparent silhouette. The sword light sprinkled down. Li Tianlan disappeared. The green leaf that deceived everyone's perception became Li Tianlan's appearance. Chen Moshue was held in his hand. Wang Shengxiao activated the Heaven Punishment Sword formation again. Besieged by three young chosen ones, Li Tianlan's night walking, and the punch that almost shattered the final hit sword formation. In the end, the mountains and rivers were silent forever. Light appeared in a dark and silent world. Wang Tianzong's palm blocked the fallen leaves one after another, and a drop of blood appeared in his palm. Di Jiang stared at the laptop in front of him. He had watched this video countless times. But, Every time I see it, I'm shocked. Dejiang closed the laptop and said softly with emotion. This video was like a bizarre and fantasy movie. In everyone's eyes, it was a little ridiculous. Dejiang was not shocked by Li Tianlan's combat capability. At least not just combat capability. To be exact, it should be the combination of this terrifying combat capability and Li Tianlan's age that caused such a terrifying shock. 22 years old, with the combat capability of the invincible realm. What do you think? Wang Tianzong glanced at Dejiang's laptop and asked. Dejiang didn't know what his master was asking about, so he asked directly, "What do you mean?" "Everything." Wang Tianzong's tone was concise. Dejiang was silent for a long time. He felt a little bitter in his heart. He was not afraid of Li Tianlan in this state, but he was already 36 years old this year. The gap between age and strength was there. Even if he had watched the video many times, it was still hard for him to accept it. "Incredible," Dejiang said. Wang Tianzong nodded and didn't comment. "His strength is not inferior to mine, and his speed is far better than mine. His martial arts sword intent seems to be very special. Master, I agree with your view. Dual wind and thunder veins are incredible, but he gives me a strange feeling," Dejiang said slowly. He spoke very slowly and seemed extremely cautious. His current conditions are completely unique. But the strength he showed, if the video is his full strength, then I can be sure that he will not be a match for me now. Although the gap is small, I am stronger than him. He is full strength. Wang Tianzong said calmly, but where is his full strength? Dejiang was stunned for a moment. He thought of the punch that Li Tianlan smashed the entire sword formation and all the elites, and the extremely quiet and empty sword. It's that piece of leaf. Wang Tianzong sighed softly. Dejiang was silent. The full strength attack in his heart was Li Tianlan's eternal silence of mountains and rivers. That sword was absolutely terrifying, strange, empty, majestic, silent, but extremely real, obliterating everything. If Dejiang didn't hold back, he could take this sword. Although he was destined to be seriously injured, Li Tianlan would definitely be more miserable than him. That piece of leaf? He couldn't see how strong it was. Although it was amazing, he distorted the space with sword intent and deceived everyone's vision and perception. In essence, it was not a doppelganger, but a sword intent. But in the eyes of outsiders, it was a doppelganger. Now in the whole dark world, only a few people who really stood at the peak of the invincible realm could master this kind of means. It was really amazing that Li Tianlan could master this, but the power of that sword intent was just so. Martial arts is the combination of strength and willpower. Our Wang family of Beihai cultivates swordsmanship. If sword energy is strength, then sword intent is equal to willpower. Wang Tianzong said. Dejiang was silent, as if thinking. "You mean," Dejiang said with some uncertainty, the appearance of the doppelganger formed by sword intent consumed Li Tianlan's absolutely focused willpower, so that when his real body appeared, he didn't show the strongest strength? Will his real combat capability be more terrifying than in the video? Wang Tianzong thought about it and nodded. Dejiang's eyes were a little frightened. He hasn't really entered the invincible realm. How is it possible? He may not be stronger than you, but he is definitely not weaker than you. Wang Tianzong said, "You have to admit that his current conditions in all aspects are better than yours. The dual thunder veins are very domineering, but with the dual wind veins, you can maximize the advantages to the limit. Your strength is not much different, but in speed, he is faster than you. In terms of willpower, the invincible manual in the map of God of War of the Li family is originally to cultivate the mind. The Li family has been in a very bad situation in recent years, and Li Tianlan's experience is enough to make his willpower as firm as a rock. Desert experience, recultivation, and recultivation after 3 years in Heaven Capital is equivalent to nirvana. In terms of willpower, he also has no shortcomings." Wang Tianzong looked out of the window. In the distance, he could already see the majestic light of the army headquarters building under the morning sun. Now he has the most perfect body, the most perfect willpower. Realm? 3 years ago, he temporarily entered the invincible realm in Heaven Capital, destroyed all his own foundation, and stood at the top. At that time, his realm was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm. Now he has the dragon vein, and his vision will be further broadened. Now his strength is not enough, but his vision is also far better than yours. Because he has personally experienced the power close to the peak of the invincible realm, he can deceive the perception of Xianxia and others with that sword intent. Dijiang rolled his eyes and said painfully, "If you say so, I am very desperate." "According to what you mean, now Li Tianlan is perfect without any shortcomings?" Wang Tianzong smiled. Dijiang was looking forward to his rebuttal, but he didn't. "Indeed. Now Li Tianlan really has no shortcomings." He continued without waiting for Dijiang to speak, "But absolute perfection itself is a shortcoming when the level is not high." Dijiang's eyes lit up, and his whole person became serious. He was the first disciple of Wang Tianzong, and Sword Emperor spared no effort in teaching him. He spent no less effort on him than Wang Xingxiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. All the resources and inheritance of the Wang family of Beihai were open to him without reservation. Sword Emperor really treated him like a son. Dijiang knew why. Hundreds of years ago, after the Wang family of Beihai completely established itself in Mount Dibing and Beihai province, the Wang family of Beihai had a god of war. The first god of war of the Wang family of Beihai was the ancestor of the Lin clan. He was also the guardian god of war of Zhongzhou state, and he also established Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun. The idea of the Lin clan was lazy and undisciplined, and they didn't like to fight for power and profit. After the Lin clan moved to Switzerland, the position of god of war of Zhuanyuantai was passed on to the Li family. After that, it was another hundreds of years. The Li family was the god of war of Zhongzhou state, and also the god of war of the Wang family of Beihai. The two families were close. For hundreds of years, the Wang family of Beihai had at least 2 experts at the peak of the invincible realm in each generation. In this generation, it was Wang Tianzong and Summer Solstice. But in the previous generation, the generation before that, and many times before that, the 2 experts at the peak of the invincible realm in the Wang family of Beihai were actually the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai and the god of war of the Wang family of Beihai. So in other words, before the collapse of the Li family, there were also 2 experts at the peak of the invincible realm in each generation of the Li family. They were the patriarchs of the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai. The 2 families had been really close for many years, and they didn't even distinguish one from the other. Now, after the Li family came back after the collapse and parted ways with the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Tianzong completely regarded Dijiang as the guardian god of war of the new generation of the Wang family of Beihai. Based on this alone, Dijiang didn't want to lose to Li Tianlan. He would rather give up everything than to disappoint his master and Beihai province. If Li Tianlan were at the peak of the invincible realm now, with all the conditions combined, he would indeed have no shortcomings. He would be perfect and powerful, and he could be called the chosen one. Wang Tianzong chuckled softly. But he's not now. Not to mention the peak of the invincible realm, he can only be said to have the combat capability of the invincible realm. The new martial arts, absolute strength and speed, perfect willpower, and extremely high vision are all combined with him. He doesn't have enough accumulation, but he bears so many perfections. At present, in addition to being powerful, his martial arts are only chaotic. You're right. He's really strange, but to put it bluntly, the so-called strangeness is that he can't make full use of his current perfect resources. Dijiang listened quietly and thought silently. After a while, he took a serious look at Wang Tianzong and said, "Master, please enlighten me. There's no problem with him in itself. There's no problem in any aspect. But the so-called perfection also needs to be compared. His physical strength is originally flawless, but with the equally perfect dual wind and thunder veins, there's a problem. Now it's difficult for his physical strength to completely support the strength of the dual wind and thunder veins. I don't know what he experienced to have the present physique, but if the dual wind and thunder veins didn't appear, he should have really entered the invincible realm now. The dual wind and thunder veins put a burden on his body. While giving him more potential, it also suppressed his realm. As for his willpower, it's naturally flawless. So he will also become absolutely focused in the state of battle, but absolute focus means faster consumption. If the willpower is consumed too fast, it's easy to relax in the case of absolute focus. If there's a flaw in the willpower, his strength, speed, and sword intent will all be affected. This is chaos. Li Tianlan is very strong now, but his shortcomings are also very obvious. If he wants to exert his strength, it's hard for his speed and sword energy to keep up. If he wants sword intent, his strength is slightly insufficient. If he pursues speed, his strength and sword intent will drag him down. If he wants to exert his full strength, the consumption of his mind and willpower can't keep up. He should have realized something. Otherwise, why did he use the green leaf in the maneuver? His real body is enough to sweep this maneuver. Obviously, he's honing himself. Di Jiang didn't speak for a long time. Only then did he understand that if his level was not high enough and he was too perfect, it would become such a huge trouble. His thoughts became a little subtle. Can it be solved? It's difficult. And it's too early to say these things. Wang Tianzong shook his head. Di Jiang was watching the video, and he was not idle either. From the end of the maneuver to the present, he had watched the video many times more than Di Jiang. Standing at the realm that was half a step higher than the peak of the invincible realm, he could naturally find Li Tianlan's problem after watching it so many times. He should have realized something now. But I guess he just feels that something is wrong. If I'm right, Li Tianlan should just realize that it's hard for his willpower to drive the strength and speed of the dual wind and thunder veins. In other words, he now feels that his body is extremely perfect, but his willpower is problematic. Yuetong often calls him in Mount Dibbing, but he rarely receives it. That guy should be resting, using a long rest to slowly cultivate his spirit. Is this wrong? Di Jiang wondered. Yes and no. Wang Tianzong shook his head. As I said, there's nothing wrong with him in all aspects. But there are problems everywhere when combined. When he realizes what's going on, it's not easy to perfect it. Most importantly, he's missing the most important thing. Di Jiang raised his eyebrows. What? Time. Wang Tianzong said calmly, he doesn't have time to perfect these. Li Tianlan needed time to perfect his body, but the information left by Qin Weibai could only buy him half a year at most. In half a year, Li Tianlan might not even realize what was wrong with him, let alone perfect anything. After Wang Tianzong solved the hidden danger inside the Wang family of Beihai, how could Li Tianlan live? It will take him a long time. Di Jiang hesitated and said softly. Wang Tianzong glanced at him and nodded. How cruel is it? Di Jiang looked at Wang Tianzong's eyes. It's best to be safe. Wang Tianzong's tone left no room for negotiation. Di Jiang smiled bitterly and shook his head. The cruelty he said was not to Li Tianlan. It was to himself and to Wang Xianxia. Li Tianlan's road was destined to have a lot of troubles. He had his own martial arts and the perfect conditions. Normally, he should enter the invincible realm soon. But the perfect conditions made his body completely unbalanced. It was destined to take a long time to perfect his body. There was no hope for at least 3 to 5 years. This time should be the time when Di Jiang broke through to the invincible realm, and also the time for Wang Xianxia to catch up with or even surpass Li Tianlan. But Wang Tianzong didn't want to give Li Tianlan any chance. It was also cruel for Wang Xianxia, who only wanted to defeat Li Tianlan. But Wang Tianzong said it was best to be safe. In fact, there was one more thing Wang Tianzong didn't say. The invincible realm was different from the 4 realms of martial arts. There was very little room for improvement. If the 4 realms of martial arts represented a person's potential, then the invincible realm was almost equivalent to the limit of a person's potential. Therefore, the invincible realm was also divided into the strong and the weak, the divine and holy lists. As far as Di Jiang's aptitude was concerned, his accumulation was rich enough. At the moment when he broke through to the invincible realm, if his potential was fully released, his combat capability would directly soar to the divine list. After stabilizing his realm, he would go one step further and finally retain countless possibilities to sprint toward the peak of the invincible realm. But for an invincible realm expert like Gu Qianquan, who barely entered the holy list after stabilizing his realm, it was almost impossible to enter the divine list. It was not impossible to break through to the invincible realm, but every small step would become extremely difficult. It was as difficult as climbing to the sky. And with Li Tianlan's potential and current conditions, Wang Tianzong didn't even want to think about it. If he solved his own problems and rushed into the invincible realm, not to mention rushing into the divine list, he was very likely to go straight to the peak of the divine list. The 100% peak of the invincible realm was the real chosen one. Li Tianlan still had a long way to go to enter the invincible realm, and there were many troubles to solve. But Wang Tianzong didn't want to wait. It was best to be safe. Chapter 390. The closer they got to the army headquarters building, the colder the streets of Yuzhou became. The army headquarters building was located at number 7 Fuxing Road in Yuzhou. It was not a busy place, but it was not remote either. However, after the location of the high-level meeting was finalized, the Zhongzhou Police Department had deployed overnight. Fuxing Road entered the second-level alert 6 hours ago, the first-level alert 3 hours ago, and the entire area was under martial law an hour ago. Under traffic control, the whole road became wide and clean. The black Mercedes-Benz crossed the square and stopped in front of the main entrance of the army headquarters building. Li Tianlan got out of the car and opened the door for Dong Qingwudi. Dong Qingwudi smiled, patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder, and said softly, "Don't rush back after the meeting. Now that you are in Yuzhou, you need to get to know some people. Especially the people in this building. Although the special warfare system is independent of the army headquarters, the two systems are in frequent contact. No matter where East Emperor Palace is in the future, it will need the support of the military." Li Tianlan nodded and responded. He looked up and down at the majestic and broad white building. Standing in front of the gate and looking at the army headquarters building, all he could see was the broad and thick white building. There was no atmosphere of power, only silence. The silence was a little solemn. This was the first time that Li Tianlan had an intersection with the core department of Zhongzhou State since he entered the secular world, and he was about to have an intersection with the entire high-level officials of Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan felt a little strange and complicated, and he was lost in thought for a while. Two middle-aged men with different clothes and temperament walked quickly out of the building of the army headquarters. The man walking in the front was a little older, in his 50s. He wore a military uniform with 2 golden stars shining on his shoulders. He was not a handsome general, and his appearance was even a little rustic, but his temperament was clean and calm. He wore more than a dozen medals on his chest. In the morning light, the medals and the general stars were shining at the same time, which looked a little weird. Behind the lieutenant general was a middle-aged man in a black suit. He was thin and had a calm expression on his face. He followed beside the lieutenant general calmly, and all the aura on his body was perfectly restrained. He was silent, like a shadow. Li Tianlan's eyes flashed, and he took a serious look at the man. He was an expert. The man's aura was restrained so perfectly that even with Li Tianlan's current perception, it was difficult to judge his strength. He could only be sure that the man's strength was definitely above the thunder-shocking realm. "Minister." The lieutenant general glanced at Li Tianlan. He was obviously Dong Qingwudi's confidant. They were very familiar, so even the salute was casual. Not bad. Dong Qingwudi looked at the neat medals on the lieutenant general's chest and said with a chuckle, "Congratulations." "Headquarters." The lieutenant general smiled meaningfully. "Minister." A middle-aged man in a black suit walked up and greeted them in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Dong Qingwudi nodded with a smile. Qingfeng, let me introduce you. Li Tianlan, the young governor of Sai City, won first place in the maneuver of the 2 academies, and founded the East Emperor Palace. Tianlan, by secretary, by Tianlan, is Li. Qingfeng, Tianlan, this young minister. Master. Is. Minister. Qing is. Knowing who was on his side, Li Tianlan first extended his hand to Hua Qingfeng and said with a smile, "Boss Hua, it's an honor to meet you. This, I've heard of you for a long time, wasn't fake at all." In the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State, the Shadow Sect could be said to be the only one that set up its organization inside the Hidden Dragon Sea, except for Kunlun City. The Shadow Sect was a new force in Zhongzhou State. It had a short time to rise, but its status was extremely important. Back then, Hua Qingfeng split from the Zhongzhou State's old martial arts force, Azura Path, and entered the Hidden Dragon Sea. At first, he was just the chief bodyguard of a top tycoon in Zhongzhou State. In just over 10 years, he established the Shadow Sect, controlled the security department, and became known to the world as one of the top 10 contemporary experts in Zhongzhou State twice in a row. Today, the bodyguards of the Hidden Dragon Sea, whether they were elites of the Shadow Sect or not, could be said to be from Hua Qingfeng. He could be regarded as the king of bodyguards in Zhongzhou State. Hua Qingfeng held Li Tianlan's hand. His palm was rough and hard, like a stone. He was a person who didn't like to smile, but in the face of Li Tianlan, a smile still appeared on his face. "Your Highness, the President and I also saw the maneuver of the two academies in Star State. Your Highness's power is amazing." Li Tianlan thanked him with a smile and turned to look at Bai Qingzhao. Secretary General Bai Qingzhao was also looking at Li Tianlan. The look in his eyes was extremely complicated. "Uncle Bai." Li Tianlan held his hand like a junior. Bai Qingzhao smiled and shook Li Tianlan's hand hard, but his eyes fell on Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi turned his eyes and looked at the star flag fluttering in front of the army headquarters building. Bai Qingzhao laughed at himself. "Uncle Bai? It's so King harsh. I'll take you to the conference room." Bai Qingzhao said. Hua Qingfeng said at the same time, "Minister, the President is waiting for you in the small conference room. Before the meeting officially begins, he wants to talk to you." Dongqing Wudi nodded and glanced at Li Tianlan. "I'll go with Uncle Bai. Marshal, don't worry about me." Dongqing Wudi said, The four of them entered the army headquarters building at the same time and took 2 elevators. Before entering the elevator, Hua Qingfeng seemed to think of something. He looked at Bai Qingzhao and said with a smile, "Secretary General, congratulations." Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingzhao's faces changed at the same time. It was really weird for Hua Qingfeng to say this from his point of view. Hua Qingfeng's face did not change, and his smile was completely sincere. "There's nothing to congratulate." Bai Qingzhao shook his head. His good mood seemed to have become a little bad. Dongqing Wudi glared at him calmly, turned around, and walked into the elevator. The elevator went up. Li Tianlan and Bai Qingzhao, who met for the first time, looked at the constantly jumping numbers in the elevator in silence. "Uncle Bai is also attending this meeting?" Li Tianlan took the initiative to ask. Bai Qingzhao smiled and said, "In addition to me, there are several old generals." Li Tianlan looked at the medal on his chest and suddenly thought of today's day. August 1st. For the soldiers of Zhongzhou State, this day was extremely important. Almost every year, a group of military generals would be conferred titles on this day. Some were really promoted and put in an important position, and some retired honorably after being promoted 1 rank. Thinking of what Dongqing Wudi had just said, Li Tianlan suddenly understood. Bai Qingzhao was now the Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters with the rank of Lieutenant General. He was undoubtedly one of the people who would be awarded the rank of General today. It was difficult to remove the title of Deputy Secretary General now, but after his rank was promoted, Bai Qingzhao would also have more leverage to check and balance the real Secretary General of the Special Warfare Group. Dongqing Wudi's influence in the Army Headquarters building would also expand again. "Sorry," Li Tianlan suddenly said. Bai Qingzhao turned around and looked at Li Tianlan in surprise. He did not expect that Li Tianlan said sorry instead of congratulating him. He even thought that he had heard wrong. "It's all a trifle." Bai Qingzhao looked at Li Tianlan for a long time and suddenly laughed. He reached out and patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder, repeating again, "It's all a trifle." Li Tianlan smiled and did not say much. How could it be a trifle? After confirming Bai Qingzhao's promotion today, Li Tianlan realized what the high-level meeting held in the army headquarters building meant. Dongqing Wudi did not know in advance that he would be specially invited to the meeting. But inviting him to the meeting might not be without the giant group's intention. Li Tianlan's eyes were complicated. He knew very well that he could appear here today. In addition to his relationship with Samsara Palace, which was worthy of Zhongzhou State's high attention, the giant group also wanted to stand at the highest level and declare his close relationship with them. Bai Qingzhao's promotion could not be without a price. Especially after Dongqing Wudi so domineeringly mobilized the army to interfere in the maneuver of the two academies. All this could only mean one thing. The transaction between the giant group and the southeast group had begun. The content of the transaction was the hundreds of thousands of elite troops of the Border Control Corps. Such a transaction, from intention to final decision, took less than a day from the end of the maneuver to now. Bai Qingzhao's promotion expanded Dongqing Wudi's right to speak in the army headquarters, but it also hurt the interests of the Secretary-General of the Army Headquarters of the Special Warfare Group. So in other words, the Wang family of Beihai had now given up cooperation with Kunlun City and turned to trade with the Dongqing clan. The relationship between friend and foe changed in a day, so fast that people had no time to react. Hundreds of thousands of troops, 5 ace armies, and countless changes in positions were destined to be impossible to complete in one day. So it was certain that before the transaction of the Border Control Corps was completed, the Wang family of Beihai and the Dongqing clan would be in a honeymoon period, and there would be no possibility of cooperation with Kunlun City. At the same time, it also meant that Li Tianlan's situation was absolutely safe during the transaction. After thinking of Hua Qingfeng's congratulations just now, Bai Qingzhao and Dongqing Wudi's faces changed. Hua Qingfeng was a capable general of the academics, and the academics must be one of the beneficiaries of this transaction. His congratulations on this occasion was indeed more like satire, but it also meant that the Border Control Corps did have an extraordinary meaning for the giant group. Especially for the Dongqing clan, for the past 2 decades, the Border Control Corps was almost equivalent to the Dongqing clan's establishment in Zhongzhou State, and everything that was conducive to the ranks of the world's super-wealthy families. It could be seen from the fact that Dongqing Wudi still held the position of commander of the Border Control Corps after entering Yuzhou that the Dongqing clan did not want to give up the Border Control Corps at the beginning. There would be a lot of room for operation, very much so. This was the second year that Dongqing Wudi held the position of commander of the Border Control Corps. If Dongqing Wudi didn't want to give it up, he could finish this term and then hand over the position. At that time, the commanders of the Border Control Corps would still be his people, and at most 2 would be transferred, which would be harmless. After the next term, Dongqing Wudi would retire, and the Dongqing clan could use the position he retired to exchange for more things and support a new commander of the Border Control Corps they supported. At that time, the Dongqing clan would still be a giant military giant. That was the safest way. But because of the final maneuver, Dongqing Wudi had come to this point. There were pros and cons. The Dongqing clan gave up the core Border Control Corps. In the next 2 terms, the Dongqing clan's influence in the military would expand to the whole situation. But unless Dongqing Wudi could hold the entire army headquarters in his own hands, when he retired, the Dongqing clan's scattered forces in the overall situation would definitely be squeezed. Of course, it was not that there was no solution. Dongqing Wudi's term was about 8 years away. If the East Emperor Palace developed strong enough in 8 years and overturned Kunlun City, and Li Tianlan was not so ungrateful, then the Dongqing clan and even the 3 pillar families of the giant group that supported him would change. The most thorough transformation. The Dongqing clan was undoubtedly blocking. They had put all their chips on Li Tianlan's future, and now there was no way out. They could have had the safest way. But they made such a crazy choice. The safest was the best? Li Tianlan was silent. At least he knew that if Dongqing Wudi had not mobilized the army to intervene in the maneuver of the 2 academies yesterday and had not fought to save his life, the Dongqing clan might have been under pressure, but they might have been able to cope with it. At least they would have taken the initiative. But now, the initiative had become passive. There was no other choice. At this time, many people in the giant group were gnashing their teeth with hatred. Was Bai Qingzhao one of them? Li Tianlan didn't know, but he really owed the Dongqing clan and the giant group an apology. Because the Li family, which had made a comeback, also had no way out. Li Honghe was defending, and Li Tianlan was destined to be the Li family's last chance. The Dongqing clan now chose to share this risk with the Li family for him. If Li Tianlan succeeded, the Dongqing clan would go to a higher level. But similarly, if Li Tianlan failed, the Dongqing clan would also be extremely tragic and no one would have a good end. If these were trivial matters, what was the big deal? Li Tianlan looked at Bai Qingzhao's rustic face. He thought he would see a smile that was a little hypocritical or at least a little helpless. But in his sight, Bai Qingzhao's smile was not forced at all, only peaceful. "I'm telling you the truth." Bai Qingzhao chuckled and said, "I don't mind Wudi's choice. The Bai family doesn't mind either. I even think this is his best choice." The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved. When he was about to speak, the elevator had already made a clear sound. The elevator doors opened to both sides. "Go to the meeting first," Bai Qingzhao said. "We have plenty of time to talk after the meeting. Then let Wudi take you to his home." The conference room of the army headquarters was really big. The conference room with an area of more than 1,000 square meters was lit up. The orange light was not dazzling, but it shone on every corner of the conference room. The long conference table was clean and elegant, with flowers in the center. The brightly colored star flag model was extremely exquisite, placed in front of the flowers. 2 rows of comfortable and spacious leather sofas were placed around the conference table. The sofas were very high, so they looked a little solemn. There were evenly symmetrical indoor fountains on both sides of the conference room. The sound of water flowing was pleasant and clear. The walls were covered with countless photos of the past presidents of Zhongzhou State, the standing ministers of the army headquarters, some outstanding generals, fearless martyrs, and outstanding heroes of the military industry. Li Tianlan even saw more than one photo of his grandpa. There were still 15 minutes before the start of the meeting. Several members of the decision-making committee who came from different places overnight had already sat in their seats in advance. Li Tianlan had seen 2 of them. Zhong Yongming, the top leader of Huding. Yi Dongsheng, the deputy minister of the army headquarters, the chief of the general staff, known as the god of army of Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan was not familiar with the others. This meeting was confidential. There were no secretaries or staff in the conference room. Bai Qingzhao took Li Tianlan around the conference room and introduced them one by one. It was impossible for them to be familiar with each other in such a short time. Li Tianlan greeted them one by one, including several deputy ministers of the cabinet, 2 deputy ministers of the army headquarters, and the top leaders of Nanyue, Huading, Beijiang, and Southwest. Li Tianlan called them by their titles. These big shots, who could be regarded as leaders in Zhongzhou State, could at least be polite on the surface no matter what they thought. Except for Zhong Yongming, who had a grudge against Li Tianlan, who called him Little Highness indifferently, the others called him Highness more politely, which sounded like it. The 2 walked around the conference room. In the end, Bai Qingzhao took Li Tianlan to an old man who was closer to the main seat. The old man wore a Chinese tunic suit that did not match the luxury of the conference room. His face was slightly dark, and he looked like an old farmer who had dedicated his life to the Yellow Land. When Li Tianlan looked at him, he was also observing Li Tianlan. There was an imperceptible sharpness in his turbid eyes. "This is Secretary Bai of Yuzhou," Bai Qingzhao introduced with a serious face. Li Tianlan couldn't help glancing at Bai Qingzhao. If the information he had was right, this Secretary Bai in front of him was Bai Qingzhao's father. Li Tianlan was not used to such a serious introduction. "Secretary Bai." Li Tianlan bowed slightly and reached out his hand. "Welcome back to Yuzhou." Bai Zhanfang, the oldest and most senior leader of Yuzhou, shook Li Tianlan's hand. He looked at Li Tianlan and said calmly, "Come to my home when you have time." Li Tianlan nodded. Bai Zhanfang pointed to a circle of sofas on the periphery. "Sit there." The sofas around the conference table were naturally reserved for the high-level officials. And the people who were specially invited to the high-level meeting would generally sit on the periphery. Bai Qingzhao and Li Tianlan chose a seat at random and sat down. An old man who looked very young but was actually as old as Bai Zhanfang walked into the conference room with a smile. There was a very calm smile on his very dignified square face. His eyes looked around the conference room and then fell on Li Tianlan. His smile grew wider. Li Tianlan, who had just sat down, stood up again. The corner of his mouth moved. Thinking of Bai Qingzhao's seriousness when he introduced Bai Zhanfang on this occasion, he also changed the way he addressed him and said with a smile, "Prime Minister Wu." Deputy Prime Minister Wu Jingmin, who ranked last in the cabinet, nodded, walked over, and sat down casually beside Li Tianlan. He was one of the Deputy Prime Minister of the cabinet and could participate in high-level meetings, but he had not yet entered the decision-making committee. During the transition period of these months, he had been sitting here. In the more than 20 years since the collapse of the Li family, Wu Jingmin had been able to steadily occupy Xianxia. In addition to his great courage to fight with the major factions, he had been following the rules. Not being pushed was also one of the important reasons why he could be as stable as Mount Tai. "Qingzhao, congratulations." Wu Jingmin glanced at Bai Qingzhao with a smile and said. Bai Qingzhao shook his head with a wry smile. "Prime Minister Wu, you know what's going on. This congratulations sounds too harsh." "It's not harsh." Wu Jingmin smiled and said, "In my opinion, it's just right. Zhanfang is about the same age as me. If you can take a step forward now, he can also feel more at ease." Bai Qingzhao was stunned and looked at his father's back. Li Tianlan glanced at Wu Jingmin. Bai Zhanfang had passed the retirement age. After this session, he would definitely retire. Bai Qingzhao was now taking advantage of the situation to go further in rank. When Bai Zhanfang retired, the giant group could use this reason to retire Bai Qingqian and Bai Zhanfang together. At present, there was a lot of resistance to Bai Qingqian's progress. But as long as Bai Qingzhao could smoothly become the Secretary General of the Army headquarters, the status of the Bai family would still be unshakable. The Dongqing clan put the future on him. And the Bai family and the Zhou family tied the future with the Dongqing clan. Feeling the harmonious relationship between Wu Jingmin and Bai Qingzhao, Li Tianlan suddenly found that he was a little out of breath. "Today's meeting, Tianlan, has little to do with you. It's mainly about the Samsara Palace. Remember, don't express your position casually." Wu Jingmin glanced at Li Tianlan, whose face was a little gloomy, and suddenly said with a smile. Li Tianlan nodded silently. At 6:25. Members of parliament from Zhongzhou State stepped into the conference room one after another. At about 6:30, the faces that Li Tianlan could often see on the Zhongzhou State news broadcast began to appear. But the way they appeared was extremely strange. Li Tianlan was not the only one who felt strange. Everyone felt that it was strange. Chen Fangqing, the Prime Minister of Zhongzhou State, and Guo Wenian, the President of the National Assembly, walked into the conference room first. The two talked all the way looking solemn. They were the two banners of the Prince Group today. Then Zhou Mulin, the Speaker of the Zhongzhou State Political Consultative Assembly, walked into the conference room in silence and made a brief eye contact with Bai Zhanfang, the top leader of Yuzhou. Before Dongqing Wudi entered Yuzhou and became a director, Speaker Zhou Mulin had always been the pillar of the giant group. Zhou Yunhai, the Minister of the Ministry of Politics and Law, walked in silently and sat in his seat. After greeting others, he drank tea in silence, as if it had nothing to do with him. The North Group could be said to be the weakest force among the six groups. When the situation was sensitive, they generally chose to remain neutral. Then came Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Zhongzhou State and the leader of the Special Warfare Group, who was pale but forced a smile. After he came in, he looked straight ahead and did not even look at Li Tianlan. Three giants who were talking softly walked into the conference room together after Gu Xingyun. Everyone stood up. Li Huaqing, the president of Zhongzhou State. Dongqing Wudi, the minister of Army Headquarters. Hua Jingyang, the second prime minister of Zhongzhou State. The two pillars of the academics and the leader of the giant group walked into the conference room at the same time. President Li Huaqing waved his hand calmly with a smile and motioned for everyone to sit down. He walked steadily and sat down in the main seat. He glanced around and said softly, "There are still a few comrades who haven't arrived yet. Let's wait." There was silence in the conference room, and the atmosphere was depressing and solemn. Today's meeting was not easy. Whether it was the attack on the Im garrison or the internal changes in the army headquarters of Xianxia state, it was not a topic that could make people relax. Li Huaqing quietly watched every member in the conference room and drank tea quietly. At 6:30, the door of the conference room was pushed open again. Except for a few directors, almost everyone stood up again. When Li Huaqing came in, they called the president. But the one who entered the conference room on time was called His Majesty. There were two majesties in the world. There was only one majesty in the dark world. There was also only one in Xianxia state. Sword Emperor of Xianxia state, Wang Tianzong. Li Tianlan quietly looked at Wang Tianzong's always calm face. Four people walked into the conference room. Wang Tianzong walked in the front. The other two giants of Xianxia state were on his left and right. They were the two leaders of the Southeast Group. Ji Wenzhang, the director of the Ministry of Supervision of Xianxia state. Wan Qingyun, the vice president. Behind the two directors was Di Jiang, the first disciple of the Sword Emperor. 9 directors. A state-protecting war god. All the members of parliament. All the specially invited members were present. Di Jiang glanced at Li Tianlan and sat down nearby. But Wang Tianzong did not come over. Instead, he sat down directly at the other end of the conference table opposite Li Huaqing. At both ends of the long conference table were the president and the Sword Emperor. On both sides were the directors and the members of parliament. There were flowers in the middle of the conference table. The Sword Emperor and the president sat opposite each other. Looking from Li Tianlan's position, it was hard to tell which was the main seat for a while. "Sorry," Wang Tianzong said blandly, "I was delayed on the way." "Understandable." Li Huaqing nodded and said calmly, "Everyone is here. There is no need to repeat more words. We are pressed for time. Let's connect now." Dong Chengwudi stood up expressionlessly and turned on the 2 screens in the conference room. The 2 screens lit up at the same time to ensure that everyone sitting in different positions could see the contents of the screen. On the screen was a communication request. The communication was quickly connected. In the early morning of Xianxia state, the other end of the screen seemed to be at dusk. The sun was still setting on the horizon. On the screen, there was fire and a large area of wreckage. Countless people were carrying stretchers and running in a hurry. Some doctors in white coats were shuttling back and forth in a hurry. Shouts, screams, and curses were heard. It seemed to be a military base in the picture, but the whole base had been destroyed beyond recognition. Countless camps had completely collapsed. Soldiers in military uniforms of Xianxia state patrolled in a daze. Only the star flag of Xianxia state was still fluttering in the wind. It's 2 o'clock in the morning in Im. It's the polar day. Wang Qianchong, commander of the Arctic Ocean Command of Xianxia state, reports to the decision-making committee. A middle-aged man in a general's uniform appeared on the screen. His face was a little dirty and his spirit looked a little tired. Wang Tianzong's cousin, the kind that is very close. Bai Qingzhao introduced calmly. "Comrade Qianchong, how is the situation of the garrison base?" Li Huaqing asked calmly. "It can't get any worse," Wang Qianchong said without hesitation, with obvious anger on his face. "President, I arrived at the Im garrison base 2 hours ago. At present, many of our soldiers are still trapped in the ruins waiting for rescue. We have a lot of casualties. The situation in Eastern Europe is very chaotic now. I'm willing to report to the decision-making committee in detail, but I want to ask for domestic reinforcements first. The sooner, the better. What reinforcements do you want?" Li Huaqing thought for a while and asked in a deep voice. "The Jiang family of South America, Knights Templars, the Heroes Club. Now Europe has gathered almost all the superpowers in the Dark World. Their masters and my soldiers are very difficult to deal with. Our country should send the elites of the special warfare system to stabilize the situation. President, if possible, I suggest restarting the snow dance corps. Wang Qianchong stared at Li Huaqing's eyes through the screen. Restarting the snow dance corps. Everyone was stunned. Li Huaqing took a quick look at Wang Tianzong. The snow dance corps. It was the special warfare corps of Xianxia state that set off the final battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago. If the final battle of Heaven Capital was won, the Snowdance Corps would occupy the right to speak in the dark world of East Island and become the most powerful force in the dark world of East Island. However, the final winner of the final battle of Heaven Capital was the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. The Snowdance Corps had been disbanded after the final battle of Heaven Capital. Although the first marshal, Gu Qianchuan, was still a marshal, he had no actual position. Restarting the Snowdance Corps? Wang Qianchong was one of the core forces of the Southeast Group. Now he suddenly made such a sensitive proposal, and no one believed that it was his own idea. Not only Li Huaqing. Almost everyone naturally thought of Wang Tianzong. Thinking of Wang Tianzong, they naturally thought of Dijiang, who Wang Tianzong brought. He had the combat capability of the invincible realm at the age of 36. Dual thunder veins. He had been entangled with the Purgatory of Heaven Capital in Tiannan for 3 years without losing ground. There was no doubt that if the Snowdance Corps was restarted, Dijiang was the most suitable candidate for the position of marshal, and it was also a very good gold-plated route. After the Snowdance Corps entered Eastern Europe and the situation stabilized, Dijiang could be transferred back as soon as possible. At that time, if he replaced Dongqing Wudi in the decision-making committee and became a member of parliament, he would sit in the position of the Border Control Corps, and there would be no problem in terms of prestige. The Ain garrison was attacked. This was tantamount to giving Xianxia state a reason to intervene in the situation in Eastern Europe. But at the same time, it was also tantamount to giving Wang Tianzong a chance to pave the way for his disciple. Li Huaqing glanced at Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi was also a little surprised. He had thought that Dongqing Wudi would give up the position of commander of the Border Control Corps at today's meeting. At present, it seemed that he could delay it for a while. Tianzong, what do you think? Li Huaqing saw that Wang Tianzong did not express his opinion, so he directly asked him by name. I agree with Commander Wang Qianchong. If the chaos in Eastern Europe gets out of control, the north of our country, not only Beihai Province, but also the northeast, will suffer a serious impact. This happened at our doorstep, and Xianxia state must show its attitude. The Snowdance Corps is a special warfare battalion. It is very suitable for them to go to snow country. Wang Tianzong said indifferently. There was a very strange light flashing in his eyes. So, who's marshal? Li Huaqing looked at Wang Tianzong, but he was looking at Dijiang out of the corner of his eyes. Dijiang was indeed qualified to represent Xianxia state in the battle. I have a nomination. I think he is the best candidate for the new marshal of the Snowdance Corps. I hope the decision-making committee can seriously consider it. Wang Tianzong said. Who? Although he already knew who it was, Li Huaqing still asked. Wang Tianzong lowered his eyelids and said calmly, Li Dunlun. No. Dongqing Wudi and Gu Xingyun's faces changed dramatically, and they spoke almost at the same time. You're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.